Irina drifted out of the cave like a celestial maiden, and appeared in front of another black cave in the blink of an eye. She stood before the opening of the cave and looked up at the vines climbing all over the rocky mountain face. Even though it was already deep into fall, and vines and leaves and were still lush and green, presenting quite a pleasant sight to behold. A hunched elderly woman was huddled up inside the cave with a slightly panicked expression on her face. "You should know why I'm here," Irina said in a calm voice as she descended before the cave. "I do." Helena turned around to appraise Irina with a pair of eyes that were inky black as the night sky, but also seemed to be twinkling with the exuberant light of stars. She also wore a calm expression as she looked back at Irina, and said, "However, I spared her life because you should be the one to do the honors. You can do with her as you please." Irina looked into Helena's eyes, and raised an eyebrow as she asked, "And what about you?" Hetty stumbled out of the cave with a frenzied look on her face as she yelled, "Irina, I'm the one behind all this, none of it had anything to do with Mistress Helena. You can do whatever you like with me, but if you dare to try and defile Mistress Helena's name, even if I die, I'll haunt you as a ghost." Helena's expression remained unchanged as she replied, "If I wanted to kill you, why would I have waited for so long?" Irina withdrew her gaze from Helena before turning her attention to Hetty, and the surrounding air temperature suddenly seemed to have plummeted significantly. Thud! Hetty suddenly fell to her knees before kowtowing a few times to Helena, refusing to stop even as the sharp rocks on the ground cut a gash into her forehead. Blood flowed from the gash into her eyes, then slid down her face alongside her tears, and her voice was quite hoarse. She sobbed, "Mistress Helena, if I am to ever be reincarnated, I'd wish for nothing more than to be your slave again." As soon as her voice trailed off, a ball of red flames appeared in her hand, and she slammed it toward her own heart. Helena turned to the side and conjured up a green leaf in her hand to obscure her line of sight, seemingly unwilling to behold what was about to happen next. However, before the ball of flames struck Hetty's chest, it was suddenly snuffed out. Her wrinkled and wizened palm struck her chest with a dull thump, but that was certainly not a lethal attack as she'd intended it to be. "I don't want to hear some tear-jerking story from you, nor do I want to see you die on your own terms. What right do you have to kill yourself before I'm done with you?" Irina withdrew her hand with a cold smile on her face, and Hetty's face gradually paled as a long thorny whip appeared in Irina's hand. Slap! The whip whistled through the air before striking Hetty's back, tearing through her skin and flesh to inflict a gruesome wound. Hetty was nothing more than skin and bones already, and her bones were now visible through the gash. A blood-curdling howl erupted from Hetty's mouth, startling away a flock of nearby birds. At the same time, many of the elves in the forest turned in that direction with bewilderment etched on their faces, wondering just who it was that would dare to wreak havoc in Mistress Helena's cave. That one was Furfyrus. Remember this, before you can confirm that I've died, don't touch any of the people close to me. Otherwise, I'll make sure that you suffer a terrible death. Irina's cold voice was audible throughout almost the entire forest, and her bone-chilling tone struck horror into the listener's heart. Very few people were aware of the context behind her warning, but they still couldn't help but shudder with fear. Slap! Another whip strike landed, flinging more blood and flesh into the air. That one was Furfyrus. I was always wondering how he'd been ambushed in Rodu, but now I know, Irina continued in a cold manner before raising her whip again to unleash another strike. That one was for me. Of course, the ones that follow this one will also all be for me. As for the reasons behind them, I don't think I need to reveal them to you one by one. The thorny whip flashed through the air like a scalpel, tearing away Hetty's flesh in blood-stained chunks. Her blood-curdling cries rang out one after another, and she'd almost been reduced to a skeleton by Irina's unrelenting assault. The entire wind forest was deathly silent. All of the elves were listening to the horrific cries echoing throughout the forest, and even though many of them were extremely far away from Helena's cave, they still couldn't help but be struck by a sense of fear. No one knew what was happening, and no one dared to go and investigate. Ever since Princess Irina had re-emerged from her cave, the wind forest had been plunged into a state of unrest. Even the normal elves in the forest could sense the dark shadow that loomed over their homeland. "That's enough." Helena raised a hand, and the green leaf she was holding shot forth before slitting Hetty's throat, thereby putting an end to her life. "Enough." Irina tossed her whip onto the ground. Despite the horrific torture she'd just inflicted, her white dress remained completely pristine and devoid of bloodstains. She turned to Helena with a deriding look in her eyes, and asked, "There's still so much trash in this forest that thrives on tormenting their own brethren, how is this anywhere near enough when they're still alive?" Helena looked into Irina's eyes in a calm manner, and asked, "Can you kill everyone on your own?" "No, I'm not on my own. All of the wandering elves that you've labeled as traitors, as well as all of the elves in the forest who've yet to lose their sense of conscience, all of them stand with me. When these sparks burn into a raging fire, you'll realize that I've never been alone." Irina's expression also became quite placid as she looked back at Helena. Helena was silent for a long while before she furrowed her brows, and continued, "I'll admit that I made an unwise decision in order to keep more of our brethren in the wind forest and bolster the strength of our elven race. Our elven race has indeed become significantly more powerful during the past century, but all of the elves in power have been blinded by their pursuit of more power and benefits, making protecting the forest and their brethren merely a secondary objective in their minds. This was something that I had not envisioned in the beginning. You planted the seed of evil in their hearts, yet when those seeds develop into unsightly monstrosities, you merely make a grudging admission that you made an unwise decision. What a joke!" Irina sneered. Helena cast her gaze into the distance and shook her head as she said, "I haven't planted the seed of evil in their hearts, I've merely given them more power, and they chose this path for themselves. It may be a little late, but I can still force them to exercise restraint so they can be of benefit to our elven race." Irina glared coldly at Helena, and asked, "So even now, you still don't think you've done anything wrong?" Helena calmly replied, "I've dedicated my entire life to protecting the forest and our brethren. In my mind, the ends justify the means, and any sacrifice is worth it as long as I can achieve that final objective." "So you're saying the lives of countless innocent elves is a worthy sacrifice for your pitiful scheme? No matter what your original intentions might have been, you're an abhorrent being in my eyes, and I'll protect the forest in my own way." Irina left Helena with a meaningful glance before turning around to depart. "They're going to try to bring you down during the ceremony in 3 days, I don't want to see you die," Helena suddenly said. "After we pass away, you'll be the guardian of this forest." Irina paused momentarily before replying in a calm voice, "I won't die, but I won't live for your sake." Faint golden light flashed, and Irina disappeared on the spot. Helena stood in silence for a while before waving a hand through the air. The chunks of flesh and blood splattered all over the cave converged to form an elf again, while the soil within the cave piled up to form a grave without a tombstone. "You can continue to stay by my side during this life," Helena's forlorn voice echoed throughout the cave. After bidding farewell to Sheer, Mag made a trip to the largest bookstore in Chaos City, and purchased a bunch of books containing information regarding all of the races on the Norland continent. Many of these books were about the church, and there were some that were quite suitable for Amy to read as well. Mag was an avid reader, and this hobby of his became even more prominent after he came to this world. He was able to quickly accumulate knowledge through reading and better his understanding of this world. This was a world in which wealth didn't necessarily guarantee a good life, so he had to arm himself with more knowledge. Of course, he also really enjoyed these busy days spent cooking, reading, and engaging in a series of other meaningful activities. At the very least, it was much more engaging and interesting than his uneventful past life. Mag paid for the books, and also issued an additional delivery fee before providing the address of his restaurant to the bookstore employee. He didn't want to be transporting a massive box of books back with him on his bicycle, so he was getting the bookstore to deliver the books to him at a designated time instead. After that, Mag paid his ice cream shop a visit. The ice cream was already packed to the rafters with customers, and Yabimiya wore her usual bubbly smile as she offered up one delicious ice cream after another to the eagerly awaiting customers. All of the customers wore blissful smiles on their faces. Not only were they enjoying their delectable ice creams, they were also basking in the atmosphere of this beautiful ice cream shop as well as the bubbly energy that Yabimiya was radiating. This is probably what natural charisma looks like. Mag stood outside the ice cream shop for a while with a smile of approval on his face. Getting Yabimiya to run the ice cream shop for him was one of the best decisions he'd ever made. After departing from the ice cream shop, Mag didn't return to his restaurant. Instead, he went to the nearby Ricky's rotisserie before making his way to the second floor. The second floor had already been cleaned up by the system, and the area of around 200 square meters was completely empty. However, the room was quite dim due to the lack of windows. Mag briefly inspected his surroundings before asking internally, "System, how much will it cost me to make half of this floor into 3 independent rooms?" The system is a proper god of cookery system, not a construction system, so please don't ask the system to complete such trivial tasks, the system replied in a serious manner. "Didn't you do all of the restaurant renovations?" Mag asked as he pursed his lips. Providing the perfect restaurant is part of the system's duty, but what you're asking for now goes beyond that. System, aren't service staff an important part of a restaurant as well? Of course. Exceptional service staff can drastically enhance a customer's dining experience, so they are indeed vital to a good restaurant, the system agreed. In that case, in order to ensure the quality of customer service from the restaurant's service staff, I have to do my best to make sure that they can get home safely every day, then have a good night's sleep so they have the energy to turn up to work and provide exemplary customer service. As such, isn't it very important to provide them with comfortable lodging?" Mag asked with a smile. "If you look at it from that perspective, then it does seem rather necessary," the system conceded in a conflicted manner. "A restaurant's employees are an extremely important component of the restaurant, so I expect the highest quality from you. Show me the blueprints before you begin renovations." Mag nodded with a pleased expression before heading downstairs. "Wait. You," the system seemed to have suddenly returned to its senses. However, Mag was not interested in hearing its objections. Instead, he cut off the system, and said, "You can give me a quote now. Of course, if you don't want to take the job, then I can consider hiring another construction team. I heard that the construction team of the City Lord's castle is currently looking for business. If I communicate with City Lord Michael, I should be able to get a friendship discount." "Don't do that. He can offer you a friendship discount, but the system can offer you a relative discount," the system hurriedly exclaimed. "So you're admitting that you're my son? I have no stupid son like you." Mag pursed his lips in a disdainful manner. "The system can provide the best design plans on the market. The floor-to-ceiling window in the living quarters will directly face the Aiden Square, and one would only need to open the curtains every morning to be greeted by the sight of the beautiful square. The system will also be providing furniture of the highest quality to ensure the most comfortable living experience, and the newest air conditioning system will constantly monitor parameters such as the temperature and humidity within the room. On top of that, the system will design a 2-person bathtub to be used by the service staff and yourself," the system said with a slightly suggestive tone in its voice. Mag almost fell down the stairs upon hearing this, and he raised an eyebrow as he asked, "System, have you been looking at weird stuff behind my back? What's this about a 2-person bathtub? Research has shown that a larger bathtub contributes to a marked improvement in one's happiness factor derived from taking a bath. Furthermore, more positions will be possible in a larger bathtub compared to a smaller one." "All right, we'll do as you say." Mag massaged his brows in a flustered manner. This system was becoming more and more ridiculous by the day. As he continued down the staircase, he said, "I think we can just skip the design and construction fees. As for the other fees, I won't ask for much, I'll only ask for a 50% discount. You can give me a final quote based on that." The design and construction processes epitomize the wisdom and efforts of a master designer and super craftsman. How could you just waive those fees? That's far too unreasonable and inhumane. And a 50% discount is way too much. The system provides only the best of the best at the lowest prices. If you ask for a 50% discount, the system will be incurring a loss, the system yelled in protest. Mag furrowed his brows as he countered, didn't you say you were offering a relative discount? How could you be so stingy to your own father? When have you ever seen a son charge their father for design and construction fees? You're the worst son I've ever seen. Other people's fathers buy them houses instead. The system grumbled. Mag raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. The system had definitely been doing research behind his back. It was becoming more and more difficult to win arguments against it. However, his expression remained unchanged as he shrugged in a nonchalant manner. If you don't want to do it, then I'll find someone else. The system will do it, the system wailed in despair and fury. After waiving the design and construction fees, then applying a 50% discount to the rest, that'll be a total of 500,251 copper coins. Just waive the remainder and do 500,250 copper coins. Mag nodded with a pleased expression as he rode his bicycle toward the restaurant. But the system already gave a 50% discount, the system roared with rage. Seeing as I've already learned how to make it, it would be a waste if I didn't broaden these foodies' horizons a little, Mag murmured to himself as he returned to the restaurant. He strode into the kitchen before bringing out a series of tools and utensils. Of course, most importantly, I can't be the only one in this world to enjoy that torturous yet blissful feeling. In China, it's kind of an unofficial tradition that parents pool funds together for their children leading up the marriage. Basically, the two sets of parents are paying for a home for the newly married couple. In an office in the Department of Education of Rodu, a stern-looking official was appraising Byron with a concerned look on his face as he said, "Master Byron, His Majesty has approved of the implementation of the decimal system, but it still hasn't been approved of to be taught in schools. That's going to create a massive obstacle in our attempt to promote the system. Students are going to focus more on the hexadecimal system as that what's going to be tested in their exams, and they'll neglect learning about the decimal system as a result." Byron turned to the official with a calm smile, and replied, "I anticipated that this would happen. The decimal system has only truly received widespread attention from the scholars of the Roth Empire in the past 3 months. Even though we've proven the superiority of the decimal system, it's still a newcomer to the field of mathematics, after all. Presenting a new system or concept to the world of scholars will inevitably be a lengthy process. We have to prepare to be in it for the long haul, perhaps for 5 years or even a decade." The official's brows remained tightly furrowed as he said, "But this is a fantastic opportunity for us, seeing as we've just won the debate. If we get delayed for too long, the Conservatives may gradually minimize the influence of the outcome of this debate. That would be very detrimental to our implementation of the decimal system. No, winning this debate has been a vast stroke of fortune for us. It signifies the first victory of the revolutionaries over the Conservatives, and Fitch has also given up on the Conservatives to learn the decimal systems. He will undoubtedly guide more brilliant young scholars and mathematicians down the same path." Byron shook his head with a smile as he said, "What our Department of Education has to do next is to set up bases to promote the decimal system in all of the schools. All of the schools are still teaching in the hexadecimal system, but we can make this a selective class that children can take if it strikes their interest. That way, more and more children will be able to come into contact with the decimal system." "That's a great idea." The official's eyes immediately lit up. Byron nodded, and continued, "You go and draft up a plan first. Tally up how many schools in Rodo we can establish such bases in, then determine how many teachers and how much expenditure would be required to support such a project. After verifying all that, you may begin the process. I'll be personally overseeing this project." "Yes, Master Byron." The official quickly departed. Byron looked out at the old tree outside the window. The final leaf on the tree branch was struggling to hold on in the face of the fall wind with all its might, looking as if it were going to fall at any moment. I hope I can live to see the day when the decimal system takes the place of the hexadecimal system across the entire Roth Empire. West of Rodu, on the racecourse of General Barclay's Manor. A tall and broad young man rode atop a black unicorn and galloped around the racecourse a few times before drawing to a stop and dismounting from his steed. He casually tossed the reins to a servant who was waiting nearby, receiving a hot towel with which he wiped his hands in exchange. He then turned to a black-robed young man standing off to the side with his head bowed, and asked, "What is it?" The young man stepped forward, and replied in a hushed voice, "Young master, according to the information that our subordinates just received, the man who won the Best Dish Award during the royal banquet, has this information been confirmed?" A cold and sinister expression immediately appeared on Timothy's face upon hearing this. The young man hurriedly nodded, and replied, "Yes, the information comes from a reliable source, and many people have tried to research him ever since he made a name for himself in Chaos City. As such, his identity has been confirmed by multiple sources." "Gould, did you think I wouldn't find you just because you changed your appearance and learned to cook?" Timothy clenched his fists as he spat through gritted teeth, "Kill that bastard, then find Ophelia and bring her back to me." "Yes." The young man cupped his fist in a respectful salute before quickly departing. "You idiots! How many times do I have to say this before it'll get into those thick skulls of yours? This is how you connect this line. Otherwise, even if the formation commences operation, we won't be able to set the wooden giant into motion. Do you think I don't know about the limitations of these formations? Do you think I'm unaware of the fact that the wooden giant can only unleash a single punch before it exhausts its power supply? If I could iron out all of these kinks on my own, what would I need all of you idiots for? Sigh, all of you truly are idiots, idiots. Idiots." Within the southwestern courtyard of the royal palace, there were all types of wood and crystals littered all over the ground. Yuri was standing among the piles of materials, looking at the formation masters he'd gathered with a disappointed look on his face. After a long silence, an elderly man finally suggested in a feeble voice, "Your Highness, perhaps we can switch to energy stones of a higher caliber as the power source. You can try that." Yuri nodded in response. Boom! 10 minutes later, a loud explosion rang out, and the resulting shock waves plastered the half-dead elderly man onto a nearby wall. Yuri heaved a faint sigh as he said, "Did you really think I wouldn't have thought of such a simple method myself, you old idiot? If the energy stones contain more power than the limit of what the formation can handle, then it'll explode as soon as it's set into motion. Didn't Father say that all of you were the most exceptional formation masters in the entire empire? I'm really struggling to believe that that's the case now." Yuri heaved another sigh as he looked at everyone with disappointment in his eyes. After changing into his male attire, Blower picked up Anna from the restaurant in the morning, and then took her on a trip around Chaos City before taking her back to the City Lord's castle. The horse-drawn carriage stopped on the side of the street near the City Lord's castle, but Blower and Anna didn't disembark from it. There were 2 employees from the City Lord's castle plastering a new notice onto the notice board, and all of the curious passers-by gathered around to see what the notice was all about. One of the passers-by began to read in a loud voice, "From this day forth, all wandering elves who are willing to settle in Chaos City will be granted citizenship and protection following a background check. On top of that, the City Lord's castle will severely punish any groups or individuals that pose a threat to the inhabitants of Chaos City. They've finally found a sanctuary." A smile appeared on Blower's face, and he simply couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart as he looked at the notice on the notice board. "Uncle Blower, does that mean everyone will be safe now that they're living in Chaos City? They don't have to worry about bad people taking them away anymore, right?" Anna asked as she looked up at Blower. Blower nodded with conviction as he replied, "That's right, Chaos City will be a safe haven for wandering elves from now on. They'll be safe as long as they come to Chaos City." "That's great." A vibrant smile appeared on Anna's face. Indeed, it certainly is, Blower replied with a smile. Did you hear? A chef from our Chaos City won the Best Dish Award during the King's birthday banquet. Really? Could it be head chef Beat from Dukas Restaurant? Beat didn't even receive an invitation, how could he have possibly won the Best Dish Award? I heard yesterday that the one who received the award was the owner of Mamie Restaurant. Seriously? How about we go to his restaurant for a meal today? Of course. News of Mag securing the Best Dish Award during the royal banquet spread like wildfire around the entire Chaos City. Of course, the foodie community was particularly interested in hearing this news. King Andrei's royal banquet was a gathering of all of the top chefs in the world. It was said that each chef could only cook 1 or 2 dishes, and it was often the case that their dishes weren't even presented to the king. For Mag to secure the Best Dish Award on such a prestigious occasion was a strong testament to his cooking. It was quite incredible that such an exceptional chef could hail from Chaos City, and the restaurant that he'd opened in the Aiden Square naturally became the hot topic among all of the avid foodies in the city. Rodu had always been renowned as the capital of delicious cuisine. It was the holy land in the hearts of all of the foodies on the Norland continent. After all, everyone who had been to Rodu and tasted the cuisines offered by the multitude of food streets there simply couldn't find any other place on the continent that could match that culinary experience. Duke Abraham had once been of the same opinion, so he'd never left Rodu as nowhere else could compare in his heart. However, he had now been drawn away from Rodu by something superior. Are you sure that's Chaos City? Abraham was pointing at the city in the distance with an excited look on his face as he sat atop his obese black falcon. That's right, Duke Abraham, we're about to reach Chaos City soon. The beast tamer beside him nodded with excitement, but his expression fell as he looked down at the black falcon underfoot. But it looks like our steed is struggling again. We'll have to land somewhere and allow it to rest for an hour or so, huff. Huff. Huff, the black falcon was panting heavily as it flapped its wings with difficulty, looking as if it could plummet out of the sky at any moment. A furious look appeared on Abraham's face. What? It has to rest again? This is the 10th time. You told me yesterday that we'd reach Chaos City by yesterday afternoon, but it's been a day and a night, and we've only just managed to see Chaos City in the distance. Are you playing with me? The beast tamer's face paled as he hurriedly replied, I wouldn't dare to do that, Duke Abraham. It's just that, we've already unloaded all excess baggage from the falcon's back, but I didn't think that its own weight would be enough to make it struggle so much, so, Abraham waved an impatient hand through the air, and said, I don't care. I have to get to Chaos City right away, throw off everything that I don't need. But, we've already thrown off all of the guards and luggage yesterday, you and I are the only ones left now, the beast tamer said in a trembling voice. Abraham cast his gaze out into the empty sky, and then turned back to the beast tamer. The beast tamer's eyes gradually widened as a harrowing thought occurred to him. Arg! Right at this moment, the overweight black falcon's wings suddenly ceased flapping, and it plummeted from the sky like a giant meatball. 2 screams of shock and horror rang out in unison. When noon struck, Yabimiya entered the restaurant with a shocked look on her face as she exclaimed, Boss, the line outside is starting to coil around the Aiden Square, there are way too many customers. There are indeed quite a few customers. Mag nodded with a slightly astonished look in response. The line outside the restaurant wasn't quite as long as Yabimiya was proclaiming it to be, but there were at least 500 people in the line already. It was more than twice the number of customers that normally visited their restaurant during the lunch service, and that number was constantly increasing. Sally wore a concerned look as she said, Won't there be many customers who line up for a long time but won't be able to get a meal? Yabimiya nodded with a sympathetic look as she chimed in, I'm worried about that too. They'd be really sad if they lined up for so long but didn't get to eat what they were so excited for. Mag contemplated the situation with furrowed brows before making his way over to the counter as he said, Mia, I'll write up a notice while you go and count out the customers. Once you get to the 300th customer in the line, tell everyone behind them that there are too many customers for us to serve, and tell them to come back next time. All right. Yabimiya nodded in response. Mag quickly wrote up a simple notice. The lunch service wasn't all that long, so serving 300 customers would most likely be the extent of the restaurant's capabilities. After you inform all of the customers behind the 300th customer of the situation, you can give this notice to the 300th customer and get them to explain what's going on to all of the customers that come thereafter. That way, you won't have to constantly stand at the back of the line during the lunch service, Mag instructed as he handed the notice to Yabimiya. All right, I'll do that right away. Yabimiya nodded before hurrying out the restaurant. Being too popular is quite a headache in itself. Mag sighed in a resigned manner as he looked out at the customers lined up outside the restaurant. Other restaurant owners would probably tear their hair out by the roots if they were to hear that. An amused smile appeared on Sally's face as she looked at Mag. She had already heard about the new notice released by the City Lord's castle. Mag had done something that they desperately wanted to do, but didn't have the ability to accomplish. He really is a good and kind person, Sally thought to herself as her gaze fell on Mag's long and slender fingers. A thought then seemed to have occurred to her, and a blush suddenly appeared on her face as her feet squirmed reflexively in a rather awkward manner. This wouldn't be a problem if you extended the duration of the services. If you extended the breakfast service by 2 hours, you'd be able to serve 300 more customers. If you extended the lunch service by another 2 hours, you'd be able to serve 600 more customers. If you extended the dinner service by 3 hours on top of that, you'd be able to serve 1,000 more customers per day. You'd be rolling in profit, the system urged in a vehement manner. System, do you take me for an idiot? If I work 24 hours a day, when would I get any time to myself? Mag pursed his lips with disdain before asking, have you finished renovating the staff dormitory? All of the renovations have been completed, and the air purification process is currently underway. It should be ready for inhabitants in around an hour or so. Good. Mag nodded with a pleased expression. Mag had specifically requested different designs for the 3 rooms based on the personalities of his service staff. During lunch, Mag put down his chopsticks with a smile, and announced, the new employee dormitory is ready, and you can all move in today. After the lunch service, I'll take you there to have a look. It's situated on the floor directly above Mia's ice cream shop. Above the ice cream shop. Yabimiya's mouth gaped open with surprise. She hadn't heard about sounds of renovations in the past few days during her time at the ice cream shop. An employee dormitory. Sally was rather perplexed. That's right. I'm rather concerned about how unsafe it is for all of you to live on your own, and your living quarters are all a little far away from the restaurant. As such, I'll be providing a dormitory to all of you as an employee benefit, Mag replied as he nodded with a smile. Sally looked at Mag with a hesitant expression, and said, the place I'm currently living at is quite good, and I have a part-time job at Gaya Hotel, don't be in a rush to turn me down. I have something else that I have to announce. During your 3-month probation period, you 2 have completed your roles to an exceptional standard, providing the highest level of service to all of our customers. As such, I've decided to raise your wages to 10,000 copper coins per month, and that will only be the wages you receive from the restaurant. Mia is currently also the manager of the ice cream shop, so she'll receive 10,000 additional copper coins a month. On top of that, I've noticed that Aisha has been heading over to the ice cream shop regularly to help out. If you'd like, you can quit your job at the hotel and help out Mia at the ice cream shop during your spare time. In that case, you'll receive an additional 5,000 copper coins as wages per month, Mag said with a smile. 20,000 copper coins. Yabimiya's mouth gaped open even more as she stared at Mag with astonishment in her eyes. 3 months ago, she had just been kicked out of a restaurant's kitchen and almost starved to death on the streets, yet Mag was now offering her 20,000 copper coins a month. She had never owned that much money at once, and she'd only ever seen so much money in one place in the coin register of Mamie restaurant, yet this was now about to become her monthly wage? Yabimiya was feeling a little lightheaded. 15,000 copper coins a month. Sally's eyes also lit up slightly. Back when she'd first decided to become an employee at Mamie restaurant, she had obviously been entranced by the food, but her other objective was to save up enough money so she could make a trip around the entire continent. During the past 3 months, she'd saved up a few thousand copper coins. She was still quite far away from having enough money to fund her trip around the entire continent, but her goals had already changed anyway. She didn't want to tour the entire continent anymore. Instead, she wanted to remain in Chaos City and help those in need here with her income. Babla hesitated momentarily, but she still couldn't help but ask, "What about me?" After coming to this world, she had gradually understood the purpose of money and just how useful it was. After losing her status as a princess, everything required money. Thankfully, Mag hadn't kicked her out during this time. Otherwise, she would most likely have to live on the streets. Mag turned to Babla with a smile, and said, "You've been working for less than a month here, but you've displayed outstanding skills and service as well. Hence, after this month, your monthly wage will rise from 3,000 to 5,000 copper coins, and after you've worked for 3 months here, you'll also be receiving 10,000 copper coins per month." Mag had no qualms about acknowledging Babla's skills. Aside from the fact that she was a little pampered and conceited when she'd first arrived, she'd grown accustomed to her role very quickly, and was significantly boosting the efficiency of the restaurant's operation. Babla's eyes also lit up with excitement upon hearing this. She was aware of the gap between herself and Sally and Yabimiya, so the prospect of earning the same wage as them after working for 3 months was certainly far from unacceptable to her. Even so, she still repressed the smile that was inching its way onto her face as she calmly said, "All right. Boss, I feel like I don't deserve that much money for what I do. I'm volunteering to run the ice cream shop, so I shouldn't receive any additional wages for that." Yabimiya shook her head emphatically as she looked at Mag. Back at her last job, she had worked non-stop for 16 hours per day, doing all types of heavy manual labor, so working at Mamie restaurant and the ice cream shop was like heaven for her. Sally was also looking at Mag with an uncertain expression. She was naturally aware that the wages Mag was offering were far above that of the standard for restaurant service staff in the Aden Square. Mag shook his head with a smile as he looked at everyone with a gentle expression. "The value that you bring to the restaurant far exceeds the wages that I'm offering you. Also, just because you enjoy your job doesn't mean I can take advantage of you and use you as free labor. If you don't accept your wages for running the ice cream shop, I'll be left feeling very guilty." "That's right, all of the customers say that the big sisters bring beautiful scenery to the restaurant." Amy swallowed her mouth full of fried rice before saying, "Even I look more adorable next to all of you." Amy's words drew a burst of laughter from everyone. "Thank you, boss." Yabimiya stood up and bowed deeply to Mag. She then raised her head, looked at Mag's warm smiling face, and returned a vibrant smile of her own. Meeting Mag was the luckiest thing that had ever happened to her. Mag was the one who had taken her from the brink of death and carried her to nothing less than paradise. "Thank you." Sally also turned to Mag with a grateful expression, and said, "I'm willing to accept a part-time role at the ice cream shop." Even though the owner of Gaya Hotel was a very good person, she still decided to quit that job and accept this new job opportunity. She had to earn more money in order to achieve her new objectives. "All right, I'll take you 3 over to the employee dormitory this afternoon. You can use the spare time during the afternoon to transport all of your belongings to your new home. The dormitory is quite well furnished, and you can move in right away," Mag said with a nod. "But doesn't big sister Aisha live in the restaurant?" Aisha suddenly asked with a curious look on her face. This morning, Sally immediately blushed as she lowered her head, her eyes suddenly seemingly transfixed on the fried rice before her. Mag raised an eyebrow and hurriedly plucked a piece of chicken into Amy's bowl as he said, "Amy, you should taste this chicken. Due to the limited serving capacity of the restaurant, many excited customers could only leave in disappointment. There were many regular customers among them, and even Mabai could only heave a forlorn sigh at the sight of the two long lines gathered outside the restaurant. Boss Mag's restaurant is becoming more and more popular, we'll have to turn up really early if we want to enjoy a meal there. Zixi sighed as she stood in front of the magic potion shop, and then waved a hand toward Lulu with a smile as she urged, let's have some food as well, it's not going to be as good as Boss Mag's food, though. A bashful smile appeared on Lulu's face as he untied his blacksmith's apron, and then made his way over to Zixi as he said in a gentle voice, as long as it's cooked by you, I'm willing to eat it for the rest of my life. I suddenly don't feel hungry anymore. Mabai heaved a faint sigh before turning around and re-entering his forge. Following the conclusion of the lunch service, Mag led Sally and the others to the employees' dormitory. Taking into consideration the fact that the spare space on the first floor and the empty half of the second floor could be used for other purposes in the future, the staircase leading up the dormitory was situated outside the back door of the ice cream shop. A luxurious carved spiral staircase had been built there, leading straight up to the door of the second floor. After entering through the door, everyone was greeted by the sight of a spacious living room paved with superb wooden floor panels. There was a large open kitchen and a dining room with a beautiful four-person table, and the dormitory was also complete with a bathroom, a shower, and a small balcony. Most of the dormitory had been constructed from wood, creating an elegant and refined effect. Wow! The three girls' eyes immediately lit up as soon as they took in the dormitory before them. Regardless of which angle they appraised the room from, it was like a beautiful work of art. Mag was very pleased with their reactions, and he smiled as he said, I prepared 3 rooms for you 3, you can choose which one you'd like to live in based on the style that you prefer. Women really are enigmatic creatures. Mag couldn't help but shake his head as he made his way downstairs. He'd prepared a pink princess suite for Babla, a snow and ice-themed room for Sally, and a starry sky-themed room for Mia. However, Babla chose the snow and ice room, Mia chose the princess suite, and Sally chose the starry sky room. Furthermore, all 3 of them were genuinely happy as if they'd all received their first choices, leaving Mag quite perplexed. This is great! I finally have a room that's not pink. Babla twirled around in her room with an excited look on her face. She then nodded with a pleased expression as she said, only snow and ice can match my disposition, pink no longer suits me anymore. It really is a wonderful feeling to be able to see a starry night sky even while lying in bed. Sally looked up at the stars on the ceiling as she lay on her bed, and she was struck by a soothing sensation. The bed that she was lying on was extremely soft and warm, just like the bed she'd slept on the night before. Upon recalling the events that had transpired the night before, a faint blush appeared on Sally's face again. Wow, a pink bed, pink blankets, and pink walls. It's so pretty and adorable. Yabimiya carefully sat down onto her bed, looking around at the room in a slightly entranced state. Never would she have thought that she'd come into possession of such a beautiful pink room someday. Within the garden of the Moraton Manor. Master, the contest between young Mistress Gloria and young Master Cyril will conclude in 3 days, the butler said to Geoffrey in a respectful manner as the latter was pruning a small pine tree. Geoffrey continued to prune the tree calmly as he said, then let's wait for the result in 3 days. The brine has been made, but it'll be 3 days before it can be used. I'm really looking forward to the first batch of stinky tofu to ever appear on the Norland continent. A peculiar smile appeared on Mag's face as he looked at the large earthenware jug positioned in a corner of the kitchen. He was already envisioning the customers' reactions to such a polarizing dish. The sun gradually set, and its dying rays colored the ground a warm red hue. 2 figures climbed to the summit of a tall mountain outside Chaos City with great difficulty. Are we there yet? Abraham asked in a feeble voice as he turned to the beast tamer beside him. His lavish robes had already been torn by branches on the way here, and he was looking quite disheveled. Having already climbed onto the mountain summit, the beast tamer cast an expectant gaze into the distance, only to find more and more mountains after this one with no end in sight. The beast tamer immediately faltered, and a horrified look slowly appeared on his face as a thought suddenly occurred to him. His body began to tremble as he turned in another direction, where a large city lay, but a mountain stood between the city and the mountain summit that he was situated on. Duke Abraham, I think, we climbed the wrong mountain, the beast tamer said in a trembling voice. Abraham was rather perplexed to hear this. Climbed the wrong mountain? What do you mean? The beast tamer gulped in a nervous manner, and then said with difficulty, what I'm saying is, we have to climb back down this mountain, then scale that mountain over there, then piss off. Before the beast tamer had a chance to finish, Abraham had already kicked him down the mountain. He then turned to Chaos City with an expression of grief and fury as he let loose an almighty roar of frustration. The lights in the blue suede clothing shop were on for an entire night. The slightly cramped and chaotic shop space had already been completely transformed. All of the tailors and equipment had been transferred elsewhere, leaving a few delightful ornaments and dresses of different styles and colors inside the spacious shop. As a result, the shop looked a little bare, but that only worked to further accentuate the beauty of the dresses that had been positioned at the center of the store. Young mistress, everything has been taken care of, you should take a rest, Mars said with a sympathetic expression while Gloria continued to work tirelessly, carefully examining the newly transformed shop space. She picked up a scrap of paper in the corner, then turned to Mars with a smile, and shook her head as she replied, I don't need to rest, I don't feel tired at all. However, I'll need you to head over to the workshop to see if the tailors have any additional requirements that would ensure their satisfaction with their work environment. Mars looked into Gloria's excited eyes, and a faint smile also appeared on his face as he nodded in response. All right, I'll do that right away. The blue suede clothing shop had become a place that was extremely popular among the upper-class women of Chaos City due to Gloria's splendid showing during the banquet held by the Chamber of Commerce. The 30 custom-made dresses had all been ordered in less than half a day, and many women were disappointed to hear that no further dresses of that style would be produced. Thankfully, the clothing shop was going to release 2 new styles of dresses, and announced that there was no cap on the supply of those 2 styles, so many women were naturally attracted to the store by this news. At the crack of dawn, a series of lavish horse-drawn carriages had already stopped outside the shop, following which one lavish noblewoman after another disembarked, and then formed a long line outside the clothing shop. Didn't you say that you needed your beauty sleep and weren't coming today? Didn't you say that you don't even like these dresses and didn't want to come? Some of the noble women conversed with one another with elegant smiles on their faces, while others were already aiming barbed insults at each other. On this day, the customers lined up outside the blue suede clothing shop and Mamie restaurant presented quite a spectacle to behold. Night fell, and the employee closed the doors of the blue suede clothing shop. Their throats were all dry and hoarse from constant talking, and they felt as if their legs had been filled with lead, but all of them wore excited expressions on their faces. Many of the employees had been working for a few years at the shop, and there had always been a severe lack of customers, breeding among them complacency, but also a sense of uneasiness about whether the shop would close down and render them unemployed. Never would they have thought that their shop would be packed to the rafters by customers someday. All of the employees had been quite skeptical about Gloria's ability to make blue suede a profitable business within the short span of a month, but all of their doubts had been completely eradicated now. This young and beautiful employer of theirs was definitely going to take blue suede to staggering new heights. Inside the office, Mars appraised Gloria with a smile as he reported, "Young mistress, we sold a total of 220 dresses today, almost half of our supply. Each dress was sold for 2,000 copper coins, amounting to a total of 440,000 copper coins. With the addition of the 30 custom-made dresses, we should have earned around 4 million copper coins by the conclusion of this month-long contest, and that amounts to around 2,800,000 copper coins of profit." Gloria wore an excited look on her face, and contemplated this report for a while before replying, "Hold back the custom-made dresses until the final day of the contest, and don't include it in our accounts book for now." "All right, I'll get that organized right away." Mars nodded before turning to leave, and the smile on his face grew even more pronounced. The young mistress is becoming more and more mature. News of the public announcement made by Chaos City quickly spread across the entire continent, drawing attention from all sides. The inhabitants of Chaos City weren't opposed to this development. Their city had always been a diverse and multicultural one, so they didn't oppose the notion of having more elves join the city. However, this was a sensitive time period right before the re-signing of the peace treaty, so this piece of news naturally created quite a stir among those in power across the continent. In a grand palace in Rodu, Andrei looked at the memorial one in his hand with furrowed brows, and murmured to himself, "What is Michael thinking here? Is he preparing to accumulate power already? Interesting. Your Majesty, do we need to do anything now?" an official standing off to the side asked in a respectful manner. "Just watch things unfold for now, the elven race will definitely react soon." Andrei set down the memorial in his hand before picking up another one. On an island enshrouded beneath grey mist in the Demon Islands, there was a massive cave that was dimly lit by a few oil lamps. A few sinister-looking demons were gathered in the cave. Bones littered all over the ground, while a few elven slaves held jars of off to the side with horrified expressions on their faces, trembling uncontrollably as they huddled together in a corner. "How dare those bastards from Chaos City release such a statement? They're going to ruin our business." "Exactly. I don't think they know their place anymore, looks like they need to be taught a lesson. We've gotten a lot of spirit stones and resources from those elven idiots during these past few years, and it also gives us an excuse to hunt down elves. We can't just give up on such a profitable business. If Chaos City wants to intervene, then they'll have to ask our Steel Bull race for permission." Within the cave, all of the demons were bickering among one another with vehement expressions on their faces. "That's enough." The tiger-like demon sitting on the main seat let loose an enraged roar, and everyone gradually fell silent before turning toward him. "It's getting harder and harder to find wandering elves nowadays, as half of them are in Chaos City, so we've had our eyes on them for a long time anyway. Seeing as Chaos City has released such a statement, there's no need for us to hesitate any longer. Surround Chaos City and capture all of the elves seeking refuge there. We'll capture a few from within Chaos City as well while we're at it." The demon chuckled coldly. "The peace treaty most likely won't be re-signed in 3 months, so the Norland continent will inevitably be plunged into chaos again. Let me see just how Chaos City will continue to survive when another war among species arises." "Haha! That's a brilliant idea. I've heard that there are women from all races for us to sample in Chaos City." All of the demons guffawed in unison. The elves huddled up in the corner could only look on with horror and resentment in their eyes. In the Wind Forest, all of the elves gathered in the Set family mansion again. "Master Borg, Chaos City has made a public announcement extending an invitation to all of the traders of our elven race. If they all seek refuge in Chaos City, then it'll be very hard for us to continue to receive traders from the demons," an elf said in an urgent manner as he looked at Borg. All of the other elves also wore flustered expressions on their faces. This piece of news had undoubtedly dealt them a heavy blow. The issue surrounding Irina still hadn't been resolved yet, and Chaos City was now further compounding their predicament. Chaos City had always been known to be quite diverse, but during the past century, they'd already developed to become a major city that wasn't inferior to Rodu. They'd evolved to become a prominent power that the Norland continent could no longer ignore, and due to beings entering and leaving the city, no one even knew just how many powerful 10th-tier beings there were in Chaos City at present. After all, there were even many powerful beings from the dragon race who liked to live in Chaos City from time to time, and proclaimed themselves to be citizens of the city during that time. Stop panicking. So what if Chaos City has made a public announcement? Do they think they can offer refuge to the elven traders as they please? As opposed to the uneasy expressions on the faces of all of the elves present, Borg wore a derisive sneer on his face as he said, 3 months from now, the century-long peace treaty will have run its course. With things as they currently are, it'll be very difficult for the 8 major races to come to an agreement and re-sign the treaty. Even if another war among species won't eventuate, there will inevitably be a few large-scale wars that take place on the borders, and the configuration of the entire continent will be transformed as a result. Borg chuckled coldly as he continued, when that time comes, the symbol of peace that is Chaos City will appear completely superfluous. They won't even be able to protect themselves, let alone offer refuge to others. All of the elves were elated to hear this, but panic soon set in again. Master Borg, is our elven race going to refuse to re-sign the treaty as well? An elf asked in a hesitant voice. A sinister smile appeared on Borg's face as he replied, that's not something that I can decide. However, I've heard that the neighboring goblins have quite a few large-scale underground mines in their territory. All of the elves' eyes lit up with greed upon hearing this. A jug of brine was peacefully fermenting in a corner, awaiting the moment when it would be able to reveal its unique fragrance to the world. Having sent Babla away to the employee dormitory, Mag was finally alone with Amy again. It was just as Mag had said, living in a house with only Amy and himself was a lot more comfortable. At the very least, when he got up at night to pee, he didn't have to worry about whether a princess would be sitting on the toilet bowl. After taking a bath, Amy was skipping on her bed in her pajamas while appraising Mag with a curious expression. "Father, do you miss big sister Irina?" Mag turned to Amy with a smile, and answered her question with one of his own. "Do you miss her, Amy?" "A little." Amy nodded with a reminiscent look on her little face as she replied, "I want to sleep in her arms. It's so warm and soft and comfortable." Mag's heart sank ever so slightly, but he still maintained the smile on his face as he said, "You'll be able to see her again soon." "Where is big sister Irina right now? Can't we go and see her right away? Why do we have to wait?" Amy turned to Mag with a perplexed expression. A pang of guilt surged through Mag's heart as he sat down on Amy's bed and patted her little head. "That's because, she's living somewhere very far away, and she's very busy, as are we. We have to wait until both of us have time before we go and see her." Amy nodded with a contemplative look on her face, and then turned to Mag with a serious expression as she said, "All right, but even if you get together with big sister Irina, don't forget about Mother. We still have to get Mother down from the moon, and after that, the 4 of us will live a happy life together with big sister Aisha, big sister Mia, big sister Babla, teacher Luna, and big sister Gloria." Mag's expression immediately stiffened upon hearing this. Back in ancient China, messages were given to the emperors in the form of memorials, which were basically letters folded in accordion form. "Have you heard? The results of the contest between young Mistress Gloria and young Master Cyril of the Moreton family will be released today. It's said that the result of this contest will determine who gets to stay as a board member of the Chamber of Commerce, and the winner will also be given a selection of businesses under the Chamber of Commerce. Doesn't that essentially mean that the winner will become the designated heir to the family?" "Not necessarily. President Jeffrey has always been renowned to be quite sexist, but if young Mistress Gloria wins this contest, then she'll at least draw level with Cyril. Perhaps she'll truly have a chance to inherit the Moreton family then." "Who do you think will win this contest?" "I can't say that for sure, but during the past month, whenever I've passed by Carrie's forge, they always seem to be super busy. In contrast, Blue Suede has always been closed, and they only opened their doors about 2 or 3 days ago. They've gotten a lot of business during these few days, but surely a couple of days of business can't compare to a month." A few businessmen were discussing among one another as they enjoyed some morning tea on the second floor of a tea house in the Aden Square. The Moreton family was one of the most renowned families of Chaos City, so the subject of its designated heir had always been a hot topic among those in the business world. Everyone had thought that despite Cyril's many fallacies, he would still inherit the Moreton family with no competition, but Gloria had suddenly emerged out of the blue to spice up the contest. Of course, if Gloria were to lose today, then this contest would be treated as nothing but a farce. It was already quite extraordinary that a prodigious businesswoman had emerged from the Buffett family. If another one were to emerge from the Moreton family, then everyone would be struggling to pick up their jaws from the ground. At the entrance to Carrie's forge, Cyril disembarked from his horse-drawn carriage with a set of dark rings around his eyes. Carrie hurried over to him from inside the forge with a fawning smile on his face, and Cyril asked, "What's the current situation like?" Carrie hurriedly replied, "Young master, up to last night, Blue Suede has earned a total of around 1 million copper coins. Even though most of their textiles were already available as part of their storage supply, they hired many renowned tailors within Chaos City and purchased many pieces of equipment, with the total expenditure amounting to around 600,000 copper coins, so their profits lie at around 300,000 to 400,000 copper coins. How have they made so much profit?" Cyril was quite startled to hear this. Blue Suede had been closed for over 20 days and only been open for the past 2 or 3 days. How had they managed to earn so much revenue during such a short span of time? However, Carrie wore a confident look on his face as he said, "Don't worry, young master, we've also earned around 1 million copper coins this month, 500,000 of which is pure profit. On top of that, I secured a few big orders during the past few days that amount to around a further 1 million copper coins. I've received 500,000 copper coins in deposits from those orders, so our total earnings amount to 1,500,000 copper coins." The contest had already concluded at 10 a.m. this morning, and most importantly, Blue Suede plastered a notice onto their doors last night, stating that they've sold out all of their supply. An elated look appeared on Cyril's face upon hearing this, and he patted Carrie on the shoulder with a smile on his face as he said, "I wasn't wrong about you, Carrie." At the stroke of 10 a.m., Jeffrey would send out a group of people to each shop in order to verify their revenue and profits, and then derive the final result from those findings. Carrie's forge clearly held an absolute advantage in both parameters. Regardless of how fast Blue Suede was selling their stock, they couldn't make any further profits, as they'd exhausted their supply, so he had won this contest for sure. "I underestimated you in the beginning, Gloria, but you were always destined to lose to me anyway." A triumphant smile appeared on Cyril's face. He was already beginning to envision how he was going to gloat to her following the announcement of the results. Carrie also wore a fawning smile on his face as he strode over, and said in a low voice, "Young master, this contest is in the bag for you. Do you remember the woman that you promised me earlier?" Cyril's brows furrowed slightly, but he quickly recomposed himself and smiled as he replied, "Of course I do. I'll send her to your house tonight." "Thank you, young master." Carrie was absolutely ecstatic. He was already beginning to fantasize about the young woman whom he'd had the pleasure of meeting once before. A hint of disgust flashed through Cyril's eyes, but he hid it by turning his head to the side before waving a dismissive hand. "Get everyone to tidy up the forge in preparation for the arrival of the verification team. Also, tell everyone that they'll get a 3-day holiday commencing tomorrow, as well as a sizable bonus for their efforts during the past month." "Yes, young master." Carrie's eyes immediately lit up in response as he hurried away. He spurred the workers into action before informing them of the holiday and bonuses that Cyril was rewarding them with, sending a stir running through all of the blacksmiths as they expressed genuine gratitude to Cyril. "You'll only be receiving a few hundred copper coins each, but I'll be getting the entire Moreton family," Cyril thought to himself in a smug manner as he looked at the elated blacksmiths. A horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of the Blue Suede clothing shop early in the morning, following which Gloria disembarked in a long grey dress. She looked at the notice on the door, stating that their supply had run out, and a smile appeared on her face as she strode into the shop. As soon as she made her way into the store, Mars quickly strode over, and said in a quiet voice, "Young mistress, the 30 custom-made dresses are ready, and we've notified all 30 customers last night. They've all confirmed that they'll be issuing the full payment for their dresses this morning." There were 30 young men and women standing inside the shop in blue and white uniforms, and an intricately carved wooden box was positioned beside each of them. Gloria looked at the beautiful and fragrant wooden boxes, then at the energetic young men and women beside them, and she nodded with a pleased look as she said, "Very good, you can all deliver the dresses now. Make sure to return to Blue Suede with the payments for the dresses before 10 am. "Yes," Mars nodded before turning to all of the young men and women as he said, "Remember to face every customer with a smile and to ensure that the dresses are delivered in perfect condition. If any mishaps occur, you'll have to pay 100,000 copper coins as compensation to the shop, only then will you be earning your keep." "Yes." The young men and women all adopted serious expressions as they carefully picked up the wooden boxes beside them, then strode out the door one after another, and got onto the white unicorns that had been prepared for them in the Aiden Square. Gloria looked at the dark rings around Mars's eyes, and smiled as she said, "Thank you for your hard work during this past month, Uncle Mars. Let's have some breakfast together." Mars' eyes glazed over slightly at the sight of the smile on Gloria's face. He felt as if he'd been transported back in time to when little Gloria would also smile up at him in the same manner as she sat on her swing in the garden. A smile also appeared on his face as he replied, "I certainly can't refuse an invitation from the young mistress herself." Not long after that, a horse-drawn carriage departed from the Blue Suede clothing shop, heading toward Mamie Restaurant. At 10 am, 2 verification teams consisting of 8 members each entered the Blue Suede clothing shop and Carrie's Forge at the same time. All of the staff were vacated from the 2 shops, including Gloria and Cyril. Over at Moreton Manor, Jeffrey was holding a cup of tea while standing beside a window, seemingly waiting for something. While the verification team checked carefully through their account books, Cyril stood in front of the forge with a triumphant expression on his face, feeling as if he had this contest in the bag. Regardless of how incompetent he was, Jeffrey had no choice but to let him inherit the Moreton family. He was destined to be the victor of this contest from the very beginning as he knew what kind of person Jeffrey was. He was an arrogant and sexist man who definitely wouldn't allow the empire he'd created to fall into the hands of a woman. He had denounced Old Man Buffett countless times for passing on his estate to Shear, and he definitely wouldn't allow himself to follow the same path. With that in mind, Cyril's smile grew even more pronounced. He felt as if he could already envision a future in which he would rule over the business world of Chaos City. Carrie also wore a smile on his face as his eyes shimmered with excitement. He had been managing this forge for half his life, and never received any chances for further development. In the end, he simply couldn't be bothered to try and better the forge anymore, which was why the business had slowly become an unprofitable one. However, everything was different now. He was riding on Cyril's coattails, and once Cyril inherited the Moreton family as well as the Chamber of Commerce, he would also enjoy a meteoric rise in status. No longer would he be stuck managing a forge, he would truly become an upper-class citizen of Chaos City. All of the employees of the forge were also very excited. They didn't know anything about this contest, but they knew that with the drastic influx of business during the past month, they would surely receive a significant wage boost. Furthermore, they had a 3-day holiday and large bonuses to look forward to. Those factors were enough to instill them with elation. Half an hour later, the verification team locked the account books of the forge into a metal box before emerging from forge. They were led by a middle-aged man in a set of black robes, and he turned to Cyril as he said, "Young Master Cyril, we've already checked through all of the account books, please return to the manor with us now, and Master Jeffrey will announce the results of this contest." "What are we waiting for, then? Let's go right away," Cyril said with a smile as he made his way over to a lavish horse-drawn carriage that was waiting nearby. Carrie was kneeling beside the carriage, and Cyril strode onto his back as a stepladder to board the carriage. All of the members of the verification team boarded 2 other horse-drawn carriages before traveling toward Moreton Manor. Almost at the exact same moment, the verification team over at the Blue Suede clothing shop also emerged. Even though all of them maintained calm expression, the astonishment in their eyes was quite apparent. The middle-aged man who was the leader of the team stepped forward in a respectful manner, and said, "Young Mistress Gloria, please return to the manor with us, and President Jeffrey will announce the result of the contest there." All of the other members of the verification team were also looking at Gloria with a hint of awe and veneration in their eyes. Gloria nodded with a smile in response. "Sure, thank you for your efforts." After all of the verification team members had gotten onto their horse-drawn carriages, Gloria turned to Mars, and said, "Mars, you should come with me to the manor as well." However, Mars shook his head in response, and replied, "I don't think it's time yet, young mistress." Gloria looked at Mars in silence for a short moment before nodding with a smile. "I think that time will come soon, though." A smile also appeared on Mars' face. Thus, 3 horse-drawn carriages departed from the blue suede clothing shop, heading toward the Moreton Manor. At this moment, the main hall within the Moreton Manor was particularly lively and bustling. Old Mistress Denise sat on a chair with her eyes closed. Even so, there was still a steely and bitter expression on her face, clearly indicating that she was not an approachable old woman. Jeffrey's third daughter, Aurora, was sitting on another chair with her legs hugged to her chest. She was wearing very loose clothing, but that still wasn't enough to conceal her skeletal figure, and her sunken eyes created a slightly harrowing sight to behold. A lot of her straw-like hair had already fallen out, and she looked like an elderly woman as she wore a derisive smile on her face. Cyril's twin daughters both wore lavish dresses as they sat across from Lance's family with gloating expressions on their faces. What's the point of a contest like this? How could father possibly lose to a little brat like her? Herna scoffed in a disdainful manner. Exactly. I think Grandpa shouldn't have organized this contest in the first place. There's only going to be one result anyway, and the whole fiasco just brings shame to our family, Herty chimed in agreement. "Shh, don't say that," Aviva scolded as she sat beside them. However, despite her criticism, she also wore a smug smile on her face, clearly in agreement with what the twins were saying. Meanwhile, Lance simply sat across from them, reading a book in silence as if he couldn't even hear what they were saying. In contrast, Mickey was glowering at Hernan Herty with fury in his eyes. He wanted to rebuke them on several occasions, but Deborah had kept a gentle grasp around his wrist this entire time, and urged him not to do anything rash with her eyes. As opposed to feeling any resentment, Deborah herself wore a gratified smile on her face. Even if Gloria were to lose this contest, this would still have been a fantastic experience for her. At the very least, she'd learned not to wallow in self-pity and cut herself off from everyone else. "Master Jeffrey is here." The butler's voice sounded from outside. Herty and Herny immediately put on wide smiles as they sat in their chairs in an obedient manner. Even though their looks were quite ordinary, the facade they were putting on did make them appear like a pair of young gentlewomen. Aurora had been slumped in her chair a moment ago, but she also immediately sat bolt upright as a hint of life returned to her eyes, instantly making her look several years younger. However, there was a clear hint of fear in her expression as well. Lance put down his book and also sat up straighter, while Mickey puffed out his chest slightly and adopted a stiff sitting posture. Old Mistress Denise opened her eyes, and the atmosphere in the hall immediately became rather tense and oppressive. Jeffrey slowly made his way into the room, and glanced at Lance first before his gaze settled on Mickey for a moment. He completely ignored Herny and Herty, yet made no effort to hide his disgust as his gaze swept past Aurora, and he made his way over to the main seat before sitting down on it. Having just been ignored, Herty and Herna both aimed a resentful glance at Mickey, but neither of them dared to say anything. The entire hall fell completely silent, and the atmosphere became quite a stifling one. 6 horse-drawn carriages stopped outside Moreton Manor. Cyril disembarked from his carriage and cast his gaze toward Gloria, who was gracefully disembarking from her own carriage, and a disdainful look appeared on his face as he sneered, well, if it isn't my exceptional niece. It really is quite surprising that you convinced the president to give you an opportunity, but it's too bad that this doesn't change anything. Gloria turned to Cyril with a smile as she replied, "If nothing has changed, then how would you be standing next to me under this set of circumstances, Uncle Cyril?" Cyril's smile stiffened, and he harumphed coldly, "Humph. You can chirp all you want now, but let's see if you can keep this up later." He then quickly made his way toward the manor. "You should be saying that to yourself," Gloria murmured as a faint smile appeared on her face, and she made her way toward the manor in an unhurried manner. "Young Master Cyril is here." A loud announcement shattered the stifling silence in the hall. "My son is here." A doting smile appeared on old Mistress Denise's face as she cast her gaze toward the entrance. Expressions of elation also appeared on the faces of Aviva, Hertie, and Hernia as they also turned in the same direction. The derisive sneer on Aurora's face became even more pronounced, and she slumped back into her seat as if she were an audience member awaiting the commencement of a good show. Cyril appeared at the entrance with a triumphant smile on his face as if everything were under his control. A relieved smile appeared on Hertie's and Herna's face upon seeing this. Cyril's confidence made the result of this contest quite apparent to them. "Father," Cyril said in a respectful voice as he hurriedly strode into the hall. Geoffrey merely nodded expressionlessly in response. Cyril turned to Lance with a derisive sneer on his face, and said, "Big brother, you should really discipline your daughter, she doesn't even know what it means to respect her elders now." Lance looked into Cyril's eyes, and calmly replied, "You should find someone to teach your daughters humility first so they don't have to learn from you." A hint of fear suddenly flashed through Cyril's eyes as he met Lance's steely gaze. From a young age, his big brother had always been better than him at everything that they did, and he still couldn't help but feel traumatized by the gulf that had always existed between them. Hertie's and Herna's expression changed in unison upon hearing this. They had always looked down on Lance's family, and they'd certainly made no effort to keep that a secret. However, Lance was now accusing them of lacking humility. If it weren't for the fact that Geoffrey were present at the scene, they would have definitely retaliated with a barrage of insults. Mickey's eyes lit up, and he turned to Lance with a hint of surprise and wonder in his eyes. In contrast, a concerned look appeared on Deborah's face, but she wasn't all that surprised by his reaction. After all, if there was one person that he would cast aside all pleasantries and risk his life for, then it was definitely Gloria. Denise glared at Lance, and scolded, "Lance, how could you say that to Hertie and Hernie? Look at how adorable and obedient they are. If you have time to be disciplining others, then you should be disciplining your own daughter. I hear she's hallucinating about becoming the heir of the Moreton family. Has she gone insane?" "Hat," Aurora pursed her lips as the derision in her smile grew even more pronounced. Right at this moment, another loud announcement sounded from outside. "Young Mistress Gloria is here." Gloria slowly strode in through the entrance in a graceful and refined manner. She stood beside Cyril, and extended a curtsy toward Geoffrey as she said, "Greetings, grandfather." Geoffrey nodded expressionlessly again in response. Gloria then turned to Denise with a calm expression, and said, "I haven't gone insane, Grandma, it's just that women are capable of doing everything that men can. People who think otherwise are, ironically, mostly women, and narrow-minded women at that." Denise's expression immediately stiffened, and she turned to Gloria with incredulity in her eyes. In this family, no one dared to speak to her like this aside from Geoffrey. Hertie's and Herna's eyes were also filled with astonishment, as well as envy and jealousy at the sight of Gloria's exquisite beauty and gorgeous dress. They had always insulted her for hiding her appearance beneath a veil, but who would have thought that the veil would be obscuring such a set of breathtaking features? Furthermore, she had completely risen above them, and left them in the dust to compete with their father. Now, she was even directly rebuking their grandmother's words, and that was absolutely incredible to them. "She's dead for sure." A gloating expression appeared on Hertie's and Herna's face as that thought occurred to them. In contrast, Lance was looking at Gloria with a hint of surprise in his eyes, but mostly approval and gratification. Meanwhile, Mickey's eyes were filled with glittering admiration as if he were getting to know his big sister again for the first time. Aurora's eyes also lit up as she reflexively straightened up in her seat. She stared directly at Gloria with an intense unblinking gaze as if she were seeing something completely unbelievable to her. You! Denise's cheeks were flushed with rage as she pointed a trembling finger at Gloria, at a complete loss for words. Cyril turned to Gloria with a cold expression, and was just about to say something when Geoffrey suddenly said in a stern voice, "That's enough, everyone, be quiet." He cast a fleeting glance at Gloria with a hint of approval in his eyes, but quickly turned toward the rest of the people in the hall. Everyone instantly fell silent, and old Mistress Denise immediately closed her mouth, not daring to utter another sound. Cyril still wanted to say something, but the sight of Geoffrey's steely expression made him swallow his words in the end. A hint of amusement flashed through Gloria's eyes. She had been wanting to say that for a long time, and getting that off her chest was very satisfying, but she had also felt a little uneasy during the process. However, it seemed that Geoffrey was siding with her in this regard, and that came as quite a surprise to her. The entire hall fell silent again, and Geoffrey turned toward the butler standing beside the entrance before instructing, "Tell the verification teams to come in." The two leaders of the verification teams soon made their way into the hall, each carrying a metal box in their hands as they stood beside Gloria and Cyril, respectively. Let's see how long you can keep up that cocky attitude." Cyril glanced at Gloria with a disdainful sneer on his face. "Filthy B***tch. When father becomes the leader of the Moraton family, I'll kick all of you out and sell you to the brothels." Herna thought to herself as she glowered at Gloria with a resentful expression. A vicious light also flashed through Hertie's eyes. "Humph, let's see who'll continue to protect a filthy B***tch like you after Grandpa dies. When that time comes, I'm going to scar your face 100 times so you have to wear that veil of yours for the rest of your life." A cold smile had also appeared on Denise's face. She had already made up her mind, after the result was declared, she was going to banish Gloria from this family. No one could speak to her like that aside from Geoffrey, and anyone who dared to do so had to pay a price for their insolence. Geoffrey turned to the two middle-aged men, and said, "Announce the results." The man standing beside Cyril opened the box in his hands, and produced an accounts book as he announced, "Last month, Carey's Forge had a negative income of 30,000 copper coins, which has turned into 1,550,000 copper coins in earnings this month. Among those earnings, 500,000 copper coins are in the form of deposits for orders due in the next month, and after deducting the 500,000 copper coins of costs, there has been a total profit of 1,050,000 copper coins." An elated look appeared on Denise's face as she exclaimed, "Flipping a deficit of 30,000 to a profit of 1,050,000? My son is a genius businessman." "Yes." Hertie and Herna were also ecstatic as they turned to Gloria with disdain in their eyes. She hadn't even come into contact with, let alone run a shop on her own, so how could she possibly have made more than 1 million copper coins of profit in just a month? It would be a minor miracle if she didn't incur any losses. Cyril also wore a smug smile on his face as he awaited the announcement of the final result from Geoffrey. Right at this moment, the man standing beside Gloria also produced an accounts book in a calm manner, and announced, "The blue suede clothing shop run by young Mistress Gloria incurred a loss of 50,000 copper coins last month, which has turned into 4,020,000 copper coins in total earnings this month. After deducting the 850,000 copper coins of costs, the shop made a profit of 3,170,000 copper coins this month, none of which has come from deposits." The entire hall instantly fell deathly silent. Within the silent hall, everyone turned to the middle-aged man as their mouths slowly gaped open in astonishment. 4 million. After a long while, Cyril finally recovered from his shock, and his voice became as sharp as that of a monkey that had just had its tail trodden on. He had seen the 1 million copper coins of profit earned by the forge build up on a day-to-day basis, and he learned for the first time just how arduous this process was, yet it was now being announced that Blue Suede had earned 4 million copper coins during the past month. Wasn't it supposed to be only 1 million? Surely there must be something wrong. How could that little brat have earned so much? Denise had already risen to her feet with incredulity etched on her face. How could this be? Hertie's and Herna's expression had also changed drastically. Their father's forge had only earned 1 million copper coins for the month if deposits were to be discounted, yet Gloria's clothing shop had earned 4 times that amount. That's awesome, big sister. Mickey also sprang up from his seat as he appraised Gloria with admiration in his eyes. Lance was also filled with shock as he stared at Gloria. It was common knowledge that Cyril was useless, but he had been in Chaos City's business circles for over 20 years, and he had far more relations than Gloria did. Even with an unprofitable business like Carrie's Forge, he was able to use those relations to secure enough orders to result in profits of 500,000 copper coins for the month, but how had Gloria achieved this? The Blue Suede Textiles shop had been incurring losses for several consecutive years. How had she reversed that trend in just a single month and earned a staggering 3,170,000 copper coins of profit? This was simply incredible. Jeffrey's expression hadn't changed much upon hearing Cyril's revenue figures. This was the upper limit on the revenue that the forge could earn in a month when operating at maximal capacity, so Cyril hadn't achieved anything out of the ordinary. However, he had opened the Blue Suede Textiles shop in person many years ago, and the shop had even been named by him in person. The textiles shop had given rise to the empire that was the current Moreton family, paving the way for it to become the colossus that it was now. However, even during the textiles shop's heyday, it had never earned 3 million copper coins of revenue in 1 month, let alone over 4 million. Not only was the total revenue astonishingly high, the rate of profit was also over 75%. In just a single month, Gloria had effectively created a miracle with relations at her disposal. This announcement was finally enough to crack Jeffrey's facade a little, and he couldn't help but turn to Gloria with a hint of shock and curiosity in his eyes. Back when Sheer had taken over her first business, it had earned 10 million copper coins of revenue in the first month, 8 million of which was pure profit, and that was the first time her name was heard throughout the business world. Even though Gloria had only earned 4 million copper coins of revenue in her first month running her first business, it had to be taken into account that she had been assigned a textiles shop that had been on the verge of closing down. How had she done this? Jeffrey's heart was filled with curiosity. Even if she'd made fabric into clothes, he had never heard of any tailor in Chaos City earning 4 million copper coins in a month. The derision in Aurora's eyes grew even more pronounced, and it was as if there were a pair of fireballs burning within her pupils. Cyril finally managed to collect himself before turning to the man standing beside Gloria with a menacing look on his face. You must be lying. That little brat's textiles shop clearly only made earnings od 1 million copper coins, how could it possibly have been 4 million instead? You're fabricating counterfeit figures for her. Denise's expression also darkened as she coldly threatened, do you know the price that you'll have to pay for lying under circumstances like these? Some people really will do anything to win. She probably had to sell her body to convince that man to fabricate those figures for her, but the lie is far too blatant to be taken seriously. Hertie and Herna's panicked expressions were also instantly replaced by their former derisive sneers. The man standing beside Gloria adopted a serious expression. In a manner that was neither humble nor arrogant, he replied, please respect our verification team. All 8 members of our team have vouched for this final result, and the accounts book has listed in detail every instance of income generated and cost incurred by the Blue Suede clothing shop. On top of that, we verified all of their remaining stock and coin registers to find that all of the results were concurrent with their accounts books. There were no counterfeit figures fabricated whatsoever. If either of you would like to express doubts about the results we obtained, then please send another verification team to Blue Suede. If the results they obtain differ significantly from ours, then we will take full responsibility for the discrepancies. Instead of backing down upon hearing this, Cyril only became even more enraged as he urged, "Then how about you tell me how she was able to earn 4 million copper coins when her shop has been closed for over 20 days of the past month? Up to last night, she had only earned 1 million copper coins. Where did these additional 3 million copper coins come from?" The man flipped open the accounts book in his hand in a calm manner, and recited, "According to our records, the Blue Suede clothing shop sold a total of 525 dresses in the past 2 days, each of which cost 2,000 copper coins, thereby resulting in 1,050,000 copper coins of revenue. However, this morning, the shop's employees delivered all 30 of the custom-made dresses to their respective customers, and full payments were issued at the point of delivery. Each of those custom-made dresses cost 100,000 copper coins, thereby accounting for the remaining 3 million copper coins, amounting to a total of 4,050,000 copper coins." Gasp! Everyone inside the hall drew a collective sharp breath. Only now did everyone understand how the 4 million copper coins had been earned. However, the fact that each of those custom-made dresses had been sold for 100,000 copper coins still came as quite a shock to them. Herty and Herna thought back to the dress that Gloria had worn during the banquet. If the same dress were being sold for 100,000 copper coins each, they'd probably trip over their own feet in their hurry to thrust their money into the seller's hands. With that in mind, a hint of panic appeared in their eyes. Each dress cost 100,000 copper coins? They're just dresses made from fabrics, not gold and diamonds. Do you think I'm an idiot? Cyril was already beginning to panic as well, but he was still trying to intimidate the verification team leader by putting on a menacing display. "Be quiet." Jeffrey cast a cold glance at Cyril as he said in a displeased voice, "I picked the members for the 2 verification teams myself, and all of them have served me for decades. I would doubt you long before I cast any doubt toward them." Jeffrey raised his voice slightly as he continued, "The final verdict has been reached. Gloria is the winner of this contest." An elated smile finally appeared on Gloria's face upon hearing this, and she turned to Lance and her family with a pair of bright and exuberant eyes. Lance also returned Gloria's smile with one of his own, while Mickey leaped straight up into the air with joy. In contrast, Cyril's face turned deathly pale as he stumbled over to Jeffrey while trembling. "Father, that's impossible. Gloria must have cheated. She must have fabricated those figures. How can anyone earn 3 million copper coins in one morning? Are you saying I'm an idiot?" Jeffrey asked in a calm voice as he looked into Cyril's eyes. Cyril immediately shuddered as he backed down and fell silent, not daring to press the issue any further. Jeffrey turned to Gloria, and announced, "From this day forth, all of the textiles-related businesses under the Moreton family will be assigned to Gloria. I'll also be nominating you as a board member of the Chamber of Commerce." "Thank you, Grandpa," Gloria said in a respectful manner, but the excitement in her eyes was quite apparent. "In 1 year, I'll be choosing an heir to the Moreton family between the 2 of you. I hope you won't disappoint me," Jeffrey said in a solemn voice as he looked at Gloria and Cyril before exiting the hall. Right at this moment, Aurora suddenly rose to her feet, and screeched with all her might, "Hat, you're willing to give her a chance now, so why couldn't you give me a chance? Just because I'm your daughter, I had to marry a man I didn't love at 17? You threw me away like some object to someone you were trying to suck up to, then tossed me aside after I was no longer worthy of exploitation." Jeffrey stopped and turned around to appraise Aurora with furrowed brows as he asked in a cold voice, "Do you think you're still worthy of being considered a human in your current state?" "Aurora, stop," Denise hurriedly urged in a low voice. "That's right. I'm not a human being. I'm not worthy of being part of the Moreton family." A tragic smile appeared on her face as she slammed her fist into her emaciated chest. She looked directly into Jeffrey's eyes with an intense gaze as she said, "But isn't this what you inflicted on me, Father? When you forced me to marry that drunkard, Lister, did you think about how much pain and torment your daughter would have to endure every single night? Did you consider what kind of abhorrent addictions he'd force onto me? You knew all along that he had all of those horrible addictions that you detested. You were the one who made your daughter like this, you kicked me down the cliff, yet you're now standing at the cliff's edge and laughing at me. Does your conscience not ache? Aurora's eyes were completely bloodshot by this point, and her sinister display was rather horrifying to behold. Geoffrey's brows furrowed even more tightly, but he still calmly replied, "It was your choice to develop those addictions, how does this have anything to do with me? What does it have to do with you?" As expected, you haven't changed at all even after so many years. Women are just things to you, there's no concept of equality in your heart. Aurora pointed a finger at Gloria as she screeched in a derisive tone, "She's nothing more than a stepping stone for that useless son of yours. Regardless of what skills and talents she may have, from the moment she was born, she was destined to fail to inherit the Moreton family for no reason other than the fact that she's a woman." A woman. A deranged expression appeared on Aurora's face as the veins on her forehead bulged in an unsettling manner. Her hands were like bony claws as she ran them down the sides of her face, and her eyes had turned completely bloodshot. The hall had fallen silent yet again, and Denise wanted to say something, but didn't dare to interject in the end. Geoffrey looked into Aurora's eyes in silence for a short while before issuing a command. "She's already gone insane. Take her away." The butler standing at the entrance hesitated momentarily before waving a hand. From outside the door, two servants hurriedly rushed in, subduing Aurora before dragging her toward the door. "You ruined your daughter. You're the one who's killed your own daughter!" Aurora screeched in a deranged manner. As she was dragged past Gloria, a bitter smile appeared on her face as she said, "Don't trust him. He's a liar. He won't allow a woman to become his heir. If you make the mistake of believing his lies, you'll end up like me." Aurora's voice gradually faded as she was dragged away, and the hall fell silent again, but the silence was quite a deafening one. Cyril's eyes lit up again, but the light in his eyes quickly faded. However, the dejected look on his face had already been wiped away. Gloria's brows furrowed slightly before relaxing again, but her expression remained calm as if she hadn't been affected much by that intense outburst. Geoffrey looked at the two of them with a serious expression, and said, "Everything that two of you do during this year will be recorded in detail, just like the account books that have been presented today. At the end of the year, I'll assess what you two have been up to and announce my final decision. During this process, 4 investigation teams consisting of 16 members each will be assessing all of your actions. 2 of them will do so out in the open, while the other 2 will conduct surveillance in the shadows, so don't try to play any dirty little tricks." Cyril's heart sank slightly, and he was suddenly feeling quite uneasy again. Meanwhile, Gloria nodded with a contemplative look on her face. Geoffrey then turned and left with the butler hurrying along behind him. The 2 middle-aged men also closed their respective metal boxes before exiting the hall, and the 4 of them soon disappeared as they rounded a corner. "You're so awesome, big sister." Mickey was the first one to rush over to Gloria, and he wore an expression that was filled with admiration. He felt as if his big sister had transformed into a completely different person, one that was super admirable and awesome. Lance and Deborah were also appraising Gloria with proud smiles on their faces. "Humph, a woman like you is hallucinating about inheriting the Moreton family? I won't allow that to happen. In this family, only Cyril is worthy of becoming the heir." Denise harumphed coldly before exiting the hall. Cyril turned to Gloria, and said in a cold voice, "You won't be so lucky a year from now. I'll show you who the true heir to the Moreton family is, and I'll banish you from the family on that day." Gloria's expression remained calm as she replied, "From this day forth, Blue Suede will belong to me, but if you lose a year from now, you won't be able to take anything with you." "Humph." Cyril turned and swept out of the room. Gertie strode toward Gloria with an enraged look on her face as she said, "I think we should cover up that smart mouth of yours with some bandages, ugly b*tch." Perhaps you wouldn't be so conceited if you hadn't grown up at the bottom of a well your entire life. Gloria glanced at Herty, and said, at the very least, you wouldn't have to make up for your insecurities by wearing a bunch of shiny rocks. You. Herty and Herna blushed in unison as they looked at the shimmering gemstones that they were both wearing. Gloria continued, also, you two had better watch your mouths from now on. According to our family's rules, you should be punished for what you just said. In the face of Gloria's warning, Herty and Herna could only swallow the insults that they were about to hurl at her. If Gloria had said the same thing to them a month ago, they'd simply continue to insult her to their heart's content as she was only a denounced woman who didn't even dare to show her face. However, Gloria was different now. She had taken over all of the textile businesses that belonged to the Moreton family, and she had also become a board member of the Chamber of Commerce, taking to the same heights as Cyril. Humph! The two twins harumphed in unison before also storming away. This rich fragrance really hits the spot. Inside the kitchen, Mag removed the lid of the brine, and took a long whiff as an intoxicated look appeared on his face. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded. Ding! Your level of perversion has increased dramatically, thereby triggering one of the system's hidden missions. Please capture a red-top tricolor duck within 48 hours. Location, Wind Forest, Warden Lake, red-top tricolor duck breeding base. What did you say? What's this about a breeding base in Warden Lake? Isn't that the sacred lake of the elven race? You're breeding ducks in it. The earthenware lid almost slipped out of Mag's grasp upon hearing this. Those aren't ordinary ducks. Red-top tricolor ducks are an extremely rare breed of wild ducks. In contrast with normal wild ducks that are quite thin with tough and stringy meat, they're more like geese in that they're a lot more supple and with higher fat content, making them the perfect ingredient for cooking roast duck. On top of that, red-top tricolor ducks are first-tier magic beasts that don't dwell in packs and usually appear as pairs. During the day, they hunt for fish in lakes and swamps, and they sleep up in tall trees at night. They're extremely alert and rare, and very difficult to capture. The water quality and diversity of the species of fish in Warden Lake makes it ideal for breeding red-top tricolor ducks, and the system has bred thousands of these ducks on a semi-free-range basis. Now, all you have to do is capture a red-top tricolor duck from Warden Lake and go through the experience of securing an ingredient from a breeding base. You'll also find that the ducks being bred in Warden Lake are completely different from the ducks you'll find elsewhere. Their soft feathers, the system quickly launched into a long spiel. Wait, the important thing right now isn't what kind of ducks you've bred, it's that you bred them in the sacred lake of the elven race. And why do we have to go all the way there to catch a duck? I'm really busy. Mag interjected with furrowed brows. He had just returned to Chaos City. If he were to go out on another trip, his customers would most likely revolt. Of course, what was even more concerning was that he had to venture to Warden Lake, which was in the heart of the elven territory. Elves were extremely territorial, so if an outsider like him were to be discovered in the Wind Forest, he'd immediately be seen as an intruder. At Mag's current power level, he was far from being able to visit and leave the Wind Forest as he pleased. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to make that one-year promise to Irina. The mission has already been released, and the 48-hour countdown will now commence. If you can't complete the mission within the allotted time, 0.5 of a strength point will be deducted along with 1 million copper coins. Oi, that's not fair. You're forcing this on me. Mag exclaimed as he raised his eyebrows. Successful completion of the mission will garner a reward of a complete Chuanjude 1 Peking duck recipe, as well as all of the ingredients and kitchenware required to cook the dish. Peking duck. Mag's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. That was one of his favorite dishes. The succulent roast duck dish was the perfect combination of crispy skin and juicy delicious meat. Regardless of whether it was eaten with spring onion strips and sweet flour sauce or wrapped in a thin chewy pancake, just the thought of the dish was quite a mouth-watering prospect to Mag. However, after Chuan Jude had switched to electric ovens to roast their ducks, he stopped visiting the restaurant. Ducks roasted in electric ovens had no soul. Are we talking about the recipe that uses electric ovens or traditional wood-fire ovens? Mag asked. The recipe being offered is the traditional roast duck recipe used by Chuan Jude, where wood-fire ovens are used and electric ovens are denounced. You'll learn the specifics after you complete the mission, the system replied. Mag was very intrigued after hearing this, but he still cautiously asked, System, the wind forest is very far away and heavily guarded by the elven race, won't I die there if I go in my current state? The elven race is holding a ceremony to praise the goddess of life tomorrow. Most of the elves will be participating in the ceremony, so Warden Lake will be far less heavily guarded than it normally is. As for how to get to the wind forest, that's something for you to figure out, the system replied in a nonchalant manner. A ceremony. A contemplative look appeared on Mag's face. The elven race believed in the goddess of life, and held a ceremony to praise their deity every year. Most of the elves would attend the ceremony, so that was indeed when security was the most lax in the wind forest. However, no one could guarantee that mishaps wouldn't arise. With that in mind, a concerned look appeared on Mag's face as he said, System, this is going to be an extremely dangerous trip, how about you give me another opportunity to return to the height of my powers? If I die, then you'll have nothing left. As long as you don't go looking for trouble, you only have a 5% chance of dying on this trip. Hence, you don't need any special trump cards to ensure your safety. On top of that, an opportunity to return to the height of your powers is a big prize reserved for significant missions, not just something that you can request at any time. You should know your place and realize that you're just a nobody, the system jeered. Fine. Don't go crying when your father dies, though. Mag pursed his lips in response. It appeared that his ploy to try and trick the system into handing out a free trump card wasn't going to get him anywhere. Otherwise, he could take the opportunity to intimidate the entire elven race during their ceremony, and that would significantly alleviate the pressure that Irina was facing in the wind forest. All right, looks like I'll have to go on a duck hunting trip to the wind forest tomorrow, Mag thought to himself. Amy was constantly dreaming of eating roast geese, but the traditional Peking duck made by the old master chefs of Chuan Jude was a far superior dish. After obtaining that recipe, he should be able to adapt it to roasting geese as well. What about this stinky tofu? Mag turned his attention to the brine before him. After making stinky tofu in the test field for the god of cookery and even taking a sip of this brine for himself, it was no longer a foul-smelling concoction to him. Instead, he could only smell a rich fragrant aroma emanating from it. I won't release it as a new dish for now, I'll do that after I come back. I can also experiment to see whether the molecular isolation system really can isolate foul odors. That will be the key to selling stinky tofu in the restaurant. Having made up his mind, Mag nodded to himself before placing the lid on the jug of brine, and the air conditioning system in the restaurant automatically filtered fresh air into the kitchen again. During this trip, I'm just going to hurry back as soon as I get the duck. It would be rather awkward if I were to run into Irina there. We only just made our one-year promise a few days ago, after all, Mag murmured to himself as the image of the elven beauty in the flowing white dress surfaced in his mind. She was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Maybe it won't hurt to steal a glance at her from afar. The outcome of the contest between Gloria and Cyril quickly spread throughout the entire business circle within Chaos City. As it was one of the most esteemed families of the city, the heir to the Moraton family had always been an intriguing topic for everyone. After Lance had announced that he was relinquishing the chance to become the heir of the Moraton family to become a teacher at Chaos School instead, Cyril became Jeffrey's only choice. Everyone had thought that Cyril would become the heir to the Moraton family and take over after Jeffrey's passing, but who would have thought that Lance's daughter would be stepping into the equation? Breaking news. Young Mistress Gloria won. She's taken over all of the textile-related businesses under the Moraton family and has become a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. The business world of Chaos City could be in for a massive overhaul. One Chuan Jude is a historic Chinese restaurant renowned for its Peking duck dish. Mag smiled, and replied, "You're very welcome, young Mistress Gloria. You secured this victory through your own abilities." He was worried that if he allowed her to continue, she'd say something like, "I am greatly indebted to you, and I can only repay this debt using my body." But then again, why was he worried about something like that? Mag looked at Gloria's shimmering purple eyes and found himself being slightly entranced. She was irresistibly beautiful, and he was worried that he wouldn't be able to turn down such an offer from her. Gloria continued, "I'll get the account keeper to collate our profits and send 20% to the restaurant, and also 10% to Luna's foundation so autumn clothing can be organized for the children. The weather is already starting to get cold, so we need to get this done as quickly as possible." A hint of warmth flowed through Mag's heart at the sight of the concern and compassion in Gloria's eyes, and he nodded as he said, "The children do indeed need some new clothes, but I'm going out on a trip tomorrow, so you can wait a few days before issuing your payment to me." "Are you going on another trip, Mr. Mag?" Gloria was rather surprised to hear this. "I'm going out to source some new ingredients. The restaurant hasn't released any new dishes in a while, so I'm going to try and find some inspiration," Mag replied with a nod. If it weren't for the system's mission, he wouldn't want to go anywhere, either. "You really are a conscientious and admirable man, Mr. Mag." Gloria looked at Mag with a hint of admiration in her eyes. He was already such an exceptional chef, yet he was still constantly looking to better himself. The two of them didn't chat for too much longer than that before Gloria departed. Mag looked on as her horse-drawn carriage gradually faded into the distance, and a smile appeared on his face. She was a woman who constantly wore a mask, and didn't dare to show her true appearance to others, yet she'd taken over all of the Moreton family's textiles-related businesses and become a board member of the Chamber of Commerce in such a short time. The catalyst for her drastic transformation was a bowl of tofu pudding. This was quite an amusing thought to Mag. The sense of achievement he derived from playing a part in such a life-changing sequence of events had already surpassed the joy he derived from cooking. It was as if he had found his calling and discovered his purpose in life. Even as a chef, he could make this world a better place. The sun gradually set. To the north of the city, a pair of humanoid figures finally climbed to the summit of a tall mountain along with a portly falcon. Both of them cast their eyes toward the city wall in the distance, and expressions of elation appeared on their faces. Abraham's lips were already cracked from dehydration as he turned to the beast tamer, and asked, "We're good to go, this time, right?" Meanwhile, the beast tamer was in an even sorrier state as there were many large bumps on his head from being kicked off the other mountain. He hurriedly said, "Yes. Duke Abraham, I assure you that it'll be able to fly this time. After these past 2 days of rest, it's recovered much of its stamina, so we'll definitely be able to fly the rest of the way to the city." The black falcon beside them also raised its head as if to confirm that it was ready for flight. Thus, the two climbed onto the falcon's back in an arduous manner. "Let's go." The beast tamer pointed toward Chaos City with an excited look on his face. The portly falcon spread open its wings and rose slowly up into the air like a bloated balloon. However, its wings were clearly flapping at a slower and slower rate during its descent, and after reaching an altitude of around 5 meters, they suddenly stopped flapping altogether, causing the giant falcon to plummet straight down as a result. "Arg! Didn't you say it was ready for flight?" Maybe it's hungry." "Erg!" Two wails of anguish rang out as the trio rolled down a mountain once again. Following the conclusion of the dinner service, Mag announced to Sally, who was cleaning up the restaurant, that he was going out on another trip. After that, Mia announced that the ice cream shop would be open for an entire day the next day. At the same time, Babla was hired on a temporary basis with an ice cream as a reward for her efforts, an offer that she gladly accepted. None of them objected to Mag's trip to source new ingredients. After all, every time he came back from one of those trips, a new dish would be released quickly thereafter, and all of those new dishes were extremely delicious. "Father, can I come with you tomorrow as well?" Amy asked with an expectant look on her face. Mag shook his head, and replied, "Not this time, you've just taken a 5-day break, and you'll fall behind in your magic studies if you take any more time off." "But," Amy pouted with a hint of displeasure on her little face. "When I come back, I'll cook a delicious roast duck for you," Mag said with a smile as he patted Amy's head. "Roast duck?" Amy's eyes immediately lit up with excitement as she turned to Ugly Duckling, and said, "So you can roast it even before it becomes a swan?" Ugly Duckling, which was lying lazily on top of the counter, immediately sprang up, falling off the counter with a dull thump. It then scrambled to its feet and rushed behind the counter, peering out at Amy with a fearful expression as it trembled with fear. "Don't be scared, Ugly Duckling, come here and let me hold you." Amy made her way over to Ugly Duckling with a smile on her face, and then picked it up and gently pinched its round stomach with a pleased nod as she mused, "Looks like you're quite fat already, you'll be delicious when roasted." An expression of shock and horror gradually surfaced in Ugly Duckling's eyes, and it turned its head away as it prepared to escape. After tucking Amy into bed, Mag switched on his bedside lamp, and then pulled out a few books from his bookshelf. These were books containing information about the elven race. He'd bought them a few days ago, but had been too busy to read them. However, seeing as he was about to go to the Wind Forest the next day, it certainly couldn't hurt to do some last-minute cramming. 2 hours later, Mag turned off his bedside lamp and went to bed. The grand elven ceremony lasted for 3 days, and was held by the elven queen herself. Aside from the servants and guards of the elven race, all elves were mandated to attend. This was clearly good news for Mag. As the second largest inland freshwater lake on the entire Norland continent, Warden Lake covered an extremely large area, extending all the way into the north from the northern region of the Wind Forest. The lake belonged to the elven race, and there were elven guards that patrolled the lake. Aside from the beautiful tales of elves bathing in the lake, there were also legends and speculation about monsters lurking within its depths. However, most of these legends originated from the other races, so the credibility there clearly wasn't very high. Mag speculated that these so-called monsters were most likely just some magic beasts. The ducks that the system was breeding were magic beasts, so the fact that they could be bred in the lake indicated that magic beasts could indeed dwell in its waters. It was just that they were most likely all low-level magic beasts. "This is a public announcement from Her Majesty. From this day forth, I will be going into seclusion. Do not disturb me unless the elven race is in grave danger. The ceremony tomorrow will be held by Helena, and all decisions in the race will be made by the panel of elders." That night, the announcement above spread through the entire Wind Forest. Mag woke up early the next morning and cooked some breakfast for Amy, as well as some lunch for her to eat during her lessons. Only after doing that did he wake Amy up. If everything went smoothly, he should be back before sunset. Due to the fact that more and more customers had been lining up in the morning outside the restaurant in recent times, Mag wrote up a sign and plastered it to the doors of the restaurant after breakfast, and then took Amy to Chaos School on his bicycle. "I'm taking a day's break to source some new ingredients. A new dish, stinky tofu, will be released tomorrow." All of the customers who had gathered outside Mamie restaurant early in the morning were looking at the sign with complex expressions on their faces. "I'm already used to Boss Mag regularly going out to source new ingredients, and I always really look forward to his new dishes, but I still feel a little disgruntled. I support sourcing new ingredients, but what is this stinky tofu? Could it be that it's actually tofu that's stinky? Is this some kind of new tofu pudding flavor?" someone suggested. Everyone's expressions changed upon hearing this. Could it be that Boss Mag had invented some kind of unorthodox new flavor? Thus, all of the regular customers of Mamie restaurant departed with a smorgasbord of emotions running through their minds. After dropping off Amy at Chaos School, Mag informed Krasua of Mamie Restaurant's temporary closure, telling him that he was out to source new ingredients, and asking Krasua to take Amy to the ice cream shop if he didn't come back in time to pick her up after school. "Boss Mag, I hope you can keep this up." Krasua nodded with a pleased expression as he looked at Mag. This was the first time he hadn't taken Amy out to source ingredients with him. After departing from Chaos School, Mag rode his bicycle out of the city through the southern city gate, riding down the main path for around a quarter of an hour, and then diverging onto a smaller path that led toward the tall mountain that reached all the way up into the clouds in the southwestern direction. Half an hour later, Mag stored his bicycle in a safe place, and then arrived at the foot of the mountain. After inspecting the surrounding area to ensure that there was no one around, he began to climb up the mountain. This mountain was known as Rayo Mountain, and it was situated around 10 kilometers southwest of Chaos City. The mountain was rife with bushes and weeds, with very few tall trees, and it was a steep and treacherous climb given the loose sand and rocks all over its surface. There were also very few magic beasts and wild beasts that appeared in the surrounding area, so it normally didn't attract a lot of human activity, either. Mag skipped up the mountain, leaping several meters with every single step, rapidly hurtling toward the summit. His body of a 5th-tier knight had provided him with explosive jumping power and speed. On top of that, after recovering his full power in Rodu, albeit only briefly, he had gained a far better understanding of his current power as well as superior control over his own body. This was a wonderful feeling, just as if his body and soul had truly combined as one, allowing him to use every single shred of power within his body to perfection in order to unleash the most power. Within a dark cave near the mountain summit, a pair of purple eyes slowly opened before turning toward the opening of the cave. A humanoid figure appeared at the opening, shining a bright light into the cave to illuminate the colossal being within. Mag looked on as the purple-striped griffin rushed over to him with an excited look on its face, and said, "Ozzy, we have to go somewhere." Howl. Ozzy rubbed its massive head against Mag's body before howling with excitement like a dog that hadn't seen its owner in a long time. "SHH." Mag hurriedly urged to be quiet with a resigned look on his face. No matter how he looked at it, he couldn't help but feel that this was a husky in a griffin's body. After returning to Chaos City, Mag had asked the purple-striped griffin to reside on this mountain. Even though it was behaving like an overzealous puppy, as a 10th-tier magic beast, it possessed a high level of intelligence, so it had been able to reside on Rayo Mountain during this period of time with no issues. Mag strode deep into the cave to pick up the Tiandu sword, and then put on a black robe and a mask before jumping onto the griffin's back, instructing, "Ozzy, take me to the wind forest. Fly a bit higher than normal and try to avoid being noticed." Ozzy let loose another howl as an affirmative response, and then withdrew its wings as it made its way to the opening of the cave. It leaped out of the cave before abruptly spreading open its wings, and in the blink of an eye, it had disappeared into the clouds amid a loud sonic boom. Mag held onto a protruding scale on Ozzy's back tightly and looked around at the rapidly receding scenery with excitement etched on his face. This was a completely different feeling from sitting on an airplane. After all, there were no convertible planes with retractable roofs. The feathers on the griffin's neck were perfectly positioned to shield Mag from the buffeting winds. Otherwise, just the high-velocity winds alone would have made it quite difficult for him to sit securely on the griffin's back. On the last occasion when he'd ridden Ozzy, the situation had been too urgent, so Mag hadn't got a good chance to experience the joy of riding the most renowned steed on the Norland continent. Now, he was naturally going to enjoy himself to the fullest. Of course, it was more important for him to acclimate himself to riding and fighting alongside Ozzy. After all, if he were to encounter a dire situation, his biggest trump card would be this powerful purple-striped griffin rather than the system. The griffin whizzed through the clouds, and after leaving Chaos City, it began to perform all types of aerobatic tricks like swooping down from high altitude and flying through narrow valleys, making what would otherwise have been a rather boring trip quite a fun and exhilarating one instead. Chaos City was quite far away from the wind forest. Warden Lake was situated in the northern region of the forest, thereby making it an even further destination. However, the purple-striped griffin was extraordinarily fast, and it only took less than an hour for a lush forest that spread as far as the eyes could see to appear in Mag's field of vision. This was a lush tropical forest with greenery that stretched beyond the horizon. There were countless massive trees that were hundreds of meters tall, and flying beasts roamed the forest in a leisurely manner, seemingly living in a place that was isolated from the rest of the world. Further up in the north, there was a teardrop-shaped lake that was like a shimmering blue gem under the radiant sunlight. Mag looked on at this marvelous spectacle with his mouth slightly agape. There was very little information regarding the elven race in Alex's memories, and there were no memories of the wind forest at all, so this was his first time seeing the wind forest. He had once tried to trek across the entire Amazon rainforest, but that trip came to a premature end due to health reasons. However, the wind forest was even larger in surface area than the Amazon rainforest, and its temperatures and humidity were also far more pleasant. Fly a bit higher, then we'll skirt around from that direction and head straight to Warden Lake, Mag instructed as he looked on at the grand forests played out before him. The purple-striped griffin flapped its wings and rose up even higher, and then proceeded to fly around the wind forest en route to Warden Lake. At the center of the wind forest, there were already many elves who had gathered to attend the ceremony, which was going to be held in the large plaza in front of the cave where the Tree of Life stood. The elven race believed in the goddess of life and cultivated nature magic. They had a great affinity with nature, and that was why they'd been able to guard the wind forest for so long. In the wind forest, nature itself would lend them its assistance. As one of the 12 major deities, the goddess of life had bestowed upon the elven race beauty and lengthy lifespans, allowing them to become a force to be reckoned with on the Norland continent. The tree of life that had stood for over 10,000 years along with the spring of life that flowed from the tree were both miraculous gifts from the goddess of life. The elves would dab the water from the spring of life onto their glabellus in order to wash away the impurities they'd accumulated during the past year, as well as to accept the blessings of the goddess of life. This was the most important annual ceremony of the elven race. All elves had once been able to attend, but elven slaves had since been excluded. All of the elven attendees dressed up in lavish clothes in preparation to participate in this grand ceremony. Tens of thousands of elves gathered in the plaza in front of the cave that housed the Tree of Life. There was a circular well paved with white jade stone in the plaza. Within it the spring of life was shimmering faintly, attracting the attention of all of the elves. All of the elves stood according to their social rank, and even though the formation was quite orderly, it also gave off an air of oppression and discrimination. The members of the 8 major families were at the forefront of the group. All of them held their heads high as they wore their lavish clothing, basking in the envious eyes directed toward them. There were still elves arriving on the scene, and the leaders of the major families weren't all that eager to begin lining up, so most of them hadn't appeared yet. Did you hear? Her Majesty has gone into seclusion, and won't be hosting this ceremony. Really? Why is Her Majesty suddenly going into seclusion? Who's hosting the ceremony, then? Princess Irina. Even if Her Majesty really has gone into seclusion, it should be Mistress Helena hosting the ceremony rather than Princess Irina. Small families like yours don't have the right to know about this information, but the ceremony is about to commence, so it can't hurt to tell you all. Thus, a piece of news quickly spread through the crowd. The public announcement the Elven Queen had made the night before had been suppressed for an entire night, but it was finally being revealed now, and it naturally created quite a massive stir. In the past, the Elven Queen had always been the one to host the ceremonies, and never had she taken a break from this role. Furthermore, the fact that she stipulated that she was only to be roused when the elven race was under dire threat made everyone quite concerned for her health. During these past years, the Elven Queen very rarely took care of any matters in the elven race, and most of her time was spent in seclusion. It was said that she was recovering from the chronic injuries she'd sustained during the war among species, but no one had ever seen her in action since that war, so her current condition was a mystery to everyone. Now that she was going into seclusion the night before the ceremony and releasing such a concerning announcement, everyone naturally couldn't help but fear for the worst. At this point, most of the elves in the Wind Forest had gathered, and all of the elders and leaders of the major families were also beginning to arrive. Elliot and Vincent exchanged a cursory glance from afar before looking away in a calm and collected manner, and then proceeding with smiles on their faces to greet the elves they were familiar with. The Brewster family and the Baybilly family were both part of the 8 major families, so as the leaders of those families, Elliot and Vincent were naturally permitted to stand in the front row. After all of the leaders of the 8 major families had arrived, the entire venue gradually fell silent. Right at this moment, a loud voice announced from outside, "The panel of elders is here." All of the elves immediately parted to create a path, and then extended respectful salutes. 11 elderly white-robed elves strode slowly through the path that had been opened up, using their staves as canes as they hobbled along. They arrived at the very front of the group where 13 chairs had already been prepared in a curved formation. The elderly elves sat down with solemn expressions on their faces, but the third seat counting from the left remained empty. Right at this moment, another loud announcement sounded. "Master Borg and Mistress Helena are here." Immediately thereafter, the tall and broad Borg with his hands clasped behind his back arrived alongside Helena. The elves on both sides bowed in a respectful manner, and even the elders who had just sat down also rose to their feet. They didn't extend bows like the other elves did, but this was already a gesture of their respect. Among these two, Helena had once been labeled as one of the 2 brightest rising stars of the elven race. She established a stable and powerful base for the elven race, thereby facilitating their retaliation during the war among species. As for Borg, he was renowned as the war god of the elven race. He was the elven queen's right-hand man, and he had slain countless enemies of the elven race, thereby forging a resounding reputation for himself. In the face of these 2 elves, who possessed extremely lofty status and reputation in the elven race, even the panel of elders had to extend gestures of respect. Borg and Helena made their way calmly along the path opened up by the elves before stopping on the tall platform above the panel of elders. Borg turned to appraise all of the elves present as he announced, "My brethren, Her Majesty released an announcement yesterday that she will be going into seclusion for some time. From this day forth, all of the matters in our race will be decided by the panel of elders, and today's ceremony will be held by High Priestess Helena." Even though all of the elves had already heard this news, it was still quite unsettling to hear it confirmed by Borg. The elven race had become quite powerful, but everyone was already accustomed to being protected by their elven queen. Now that she was suddenly going into indefinite seclusion, everyone couldn't help but fear for the worst. Borg swept his gaze across all of the elves present before continuing, "There's no need to panic, everyone. Her Majesty is only going into seclusion in order to ascend to the next tier. During this time, I will be protecting all of my elven brethren in the Wind Forest. No enemy will be able to infiltrate our forest on my watch." All of the elves gradually calmed down upon hearing this, and expressions of scorching reverence appeared in their eyes as they all turned toward him. Helena's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at Borg, but her expression remained completely unchanged. The smile on Borg's face faded, and he adopted a serious expression as he said in a heavy voice, "However, prior to the commencement of the ceremony, I have to do something. This will impact every single elf in our elven race, and the operation of our current social system and elven law hinges on this. What I'm about to do next will play a major role in shaping the future of our entire race." "What is it?" All of the elves were rather confused to hear this. Just what could it be that was making Master Borg adopt such a serious demeanor? Helena's brows furrowed slightly as she cast her gaze toward the nearby cave. Faint green light was shimmering within the cave, but aside from that, nothing seemed to be happening in there. 2 months ago, Schubert of the Kral family was horrifically slain for no reason. Our elven race lost a 10th tier great magic caster on that day. 5 days ago, the leader of the Elven Guard Squad and 8th tier wood-type magic caster, Kobil, was killed while attempting to detain a group of traitors. To further add insult to injury, all of those traitors were released. A hint of sorrow appeared on Borg's solemn face. And the one responsible for all this, is none other than Princess Irina. All of the elves' expressions gradually changed upon hearing this. There had been many different stories about how Schubert and Kobold had died, but all of them were linked to Irina in one way or another. However, Irina had always held an extremely high status in the elven race, so most elves were of the opinion that the fault had to lie with Schubert and Kobold for the two to have been killed. But now, it appeared that Master Borg was offering an explanation to the contrary. I think Princess Irina has already been infected by dark magic, and has become a traitor. As such, she is no longer fit to be the elven princess. I hereby strongly request that the panel of elders strip Irina of her position as the elven princess. Borg's voice rang out across the entire wind forest. The purple-striped griffin hurtled through the air, sweeping up strong winds with its powerful wings that sent ripples running across the calm surface of the lake beneath it. Mag looked down at the schools of fish that were dispersing with fright, and an elated smile appeared on his face. This was much more exhilarating than flying on a helicopter. The griffin skirted around the wind forest and reached Warden Lake, and as expected, they really did encounter no elves along the way. After taking care to avoid the three small groups of elves who were patrolling at the shore and center of the lake, Mag instructed the griffin to swoop down and fly close to the surface of the lake. Warden Lake was extremely large in surface area, and a few little islands dotted its surface. Golden reeds could be seen everywhere over the lake, and they acted as the perfect camouflage even for a massive beast like the purple-striped griffin. However, it was exactly due to the existence of these reeds that catching a duck here would not be as simple as Mag had imagined. As the griffin flew through a bunch of reeds, a multitude of birds flew up into the air from the reeds in a blind panic. There were wild ducks, geese, and various types of unidentifiable birds. Some of them had even been frightened to such an extent by the menacing aura emanating from the griffin that they fell dead onto the surface of the lake. "Hold back your aura a little, we're not trying to kill everything here." Mag heaved a resigned sigh as he looked down at the dead birds they'd left in their wake. The purple-striped griffin nodded and suppressed its powerful aura significantly. There were still all types of birds being startled into flight, but at the very least, none of them fell dead on the spot. Mag inspected the birds that flew up from the reeds with rapt focus, but even after half an hour of intense inspection, he still didn't find what he was looking for. He massaged his tired eyes in a resigned manner as he said internally, "System, what do those red-top tricolor ducks look like? Can you at least give me a picture? Can you seriously not figure out what they look like from such an obvious name? They're ducks with tufts of red feathers on the tops of their heads and feathers of 3 different colors all over their bodies." "Do you understand now?" the system replied in an exasperated manner. "Give me a picture," Mag requested flatly with a roll of his eyes. He hadn't seen any ducks which fitted that description this entire time. "All right, looks like I overestimated your capabilities." Thus, an image appeared in Mag's mind, depicting a very unique duck. To put it simply, it was as if someone had grabbed a white swan, smeared red paint on its head, then splashed green, black, and red paint all over its body, and insisted on calling it a duck. Mag fell silent with a complex expression on his face. "System, you didn't just draw this duck on the spot, did you? Is this another new species that you created? You're so narrow-minded that it's absolutely appalling. Nature is the greatest creator of all, it can even create something like you, so why insinuate that I drew this duck? Also, the duck may not be the prettiest bird you've ever seen, but when God closed a door on it, he opened a window instead. Despite its appearance, its meat is even more delicious than that of geese. Is it a good thing for a duck that it tastes good? It feels like not only did God close a door on it, he also sealed the window shut, and then tossed in a hand grenade for good measure," Mag countered with a shrug. The system was slightly stumped before continuing, "In any case, just keep searching according to that image. If you want to secure the best ingredients, patience and diligence are your best friends." The best ingredients will often be hiding in the most unexpected places, so it's not that easy to find them. Mag rolled his eyes in response, but he really did begin to inspect his surroundings with more care and diligence thereafter. The ceremony was going to last around 3 hours. During this time, he had to find a duck, and then depart from this place to complete the mission. Borg's words immediately drew deathly silence from the entire crowd. Hesitant expression appeared on the faces of all of the elves present. Even though Borg was accusing Irina of these crimes, it was still quite a big jump for her to stripped of her position as princess. As the elven princess, Irina had received the acknowledgement of the Tree of Life, and had been especially blessed by the Goddess of Life since birth. She possessed astonishing aptitude and was the most powerful elf among the younger generation. She had even surpassed many of the elves who had lived for several centuries, and even Schubert had fallen to her in just a single attack. She reigned supreme across the Norland continent and was revered by countless beings. She was the pride of the elven race, and in the hearts of all of the elves, she was the next elven queen. At just 30 years of age, she had become a 10th-tier great magic caster, and she still had centuries ahead of her. Who knew what dizzying heights she would reach during this time? Perhaps she'd grow to become even more powerful than the elven queen. However, Borg was suggesting for her to be demoted. One cannot kill our brethren for no reason, even if she is the elven princess. Besides, senseless slaughter is not something that a princess would engage in. Schubert was such a kind elf, and he was my good friend for hundreds of years, yet he was killed by Irina for no reason whatsoever. The leader of the Berman family, one of 8 major families, yelled in a vehement manner. Irina has impeded our efforts to capture elven traitors on many occasions, and not only has she thrown her support behind these traitors, she has even killed Schubert and Kobold for their sake. Master Borg is right. Her horrendous deeds are enough for her to be labeled a traitor, and not only should she be stripped of her title as princess, she should be killed to avenge all of our innocent brethren who have died by her hands. The leader of the Earhart family concurred in a cold voice. On behalf of the Brad family, I support the ousting of Princess Irina. Please make the final decision, esteemed panel of elders. I also support the ousting of Irina. In just a few minutes, 4 of the 8 major families had thrown their support for Irina's deposition, and more family leaders were beginning to contribute to this trend. All of a sudden, many of the elves on the plaza became extremely heated, and a loud chorus of chants rang out. Oust Irina! Avenge our innocent fallen brethren! Borg cast his gaze toward the other 4 major family leaders who hadn't yet expressed their stance on the matter, and a cold light flashed through his eyes. The 4 family leaders didn't dare to meet Borg's cold gaze, and all of them turned toward Helena. These 4 family leaders naturally included Elliot and Vincent. All of the family leaders who hadn't joined in on the chorus of chants in the crowd were also looking at Helena, and even many of the elders had turned to her in order to gauge her reaction. As she was the high priestess of the elven race, Helena's influence exceeded that of Borg, and was second only to the influence of the elven queen herself. During these past years, the elven queen very rarely took care of matters in the elven race, and Helena had been the one to manage the elven race in her absence. Hence, despite the power of Borg's set family, he still wasn't able to sway everyone's opinion. The family system had been proposed and established by Helena from the very beginning, and most of the major family leaders present had been chosen by her. Hence, her stance on the matter was of utmost importance. Borg's brows furrowed as he turned to Helena, and began, High Priestess Helena, the Goddess of Life and Her Majesty chose me. Who do you think you are to think you can depose me? A graceful figure slowly made its way out of the cave. Princess Irina. All of the elves turned toward the cave to find Irina slowly emerging from within in a flowing white dress. Her expression was as calm as ever, and she seemed to be completely unfazed by the collective chants advocating for her deposition. All of the younger elves became rather conflicted at the sight of her. Not only was Irina the elven princess, she was the idol of the younger generation of elves. All elves wanted to live as carefreely and willfully as Irina did. All of them aspired to become as powerful as her, and in their hearts, she was just as important as the Elven Queen. In fact, many of them had already convinced themselves that she was going to become the next Elven Queen. However, Borg was aiming some very severe accusations at her and proposing for her to be ousted, and there were even some family leaders proclaiming that she should be killed. Now, Irina had appeared before everyone. She was just as domineering and straightforward as ever. She didn't try to hide, nor did she offer any explanations. Just her presence alone had silenced the entire plaza, and even the leaders of the 8 major families had all fallen silent. Regardless of what they thought of her, they had to admit that she was far too powerful to be ignored. She had slain Schubert with just a single attack, and just a few days ago, she had slain 7 10th-tier powerful beings alongside Alex. As such, the rumors that suggested that she had been severely debilitated following her difficult childbirth were naturally debunked. She was still the same elven princess who was so powerful that others could only tremble in her presence. Irina stopped in front of the spring of life and cast a cold, derisive gaze at Borg as she sneered, "Looks like you couldn't hold back any longer. Her Majesty has only just gone into seclusion, and you're already trying to replace her." Borg turned to Irina with a cold expression, and replied, "Irina, you slaughtered our innocent brethren and released elven traitors on many occasions. Your actions clearly indicate that you've been infected by dark magic, thereby turning your back on the goddess of life." Expressions of rage gradually appeared on the faces of many elves as they looked at Irina. The goddess of life was the faith of the elven race, and she had provided protection as well as guidance to the elven race for countless years. All those who turned their backs on the goddess of life were traitors of the elven race. They cultivated dark magic, thereby renouncing their origins, and even after being detained at the Wind Forest and cleansed of their dark magic, they would be reduced to slaves for the rest of their lives. If Irina really had turned her back on the goddess of life, then she was a traitor who had cultivated dark magic, thereby making her an enemy of the entire elven race. This was unacceptable to all elves. Dark magic? Had, a derisive sneer appeared on Irina's face as she looked at Borg. All of a sudden, a burst of bright green light appeared on the palm of her hand, and a seed began to sprout from there before growing into a small tree. Specks of green light then drifted out of the cave behind her as a branch of the tree of life extended from within. The branch wound itself around Irina before gently tapping the small tree, and faint green light shone down onto the small tree, giving its leaves a translucent form. "On what basis are you calling me a traitor, Borg? Is everyone just supposed to believe that big mouth of yours?" Irina slowly raised the small tree in her hand as she asked, "If I were a traitor, do you think the tree of life would have found out after you did? If I had turned my back on the goddess of life, do you think the tree of life would have sent energy to me from afar when I almost died in Rodu? If I were using dark magic, then how did I manage to make this seed grow?" All of the elves gradually fell silent at the sight of the small tree in Irina's hand as well as the branch of the tree of life that was revolving around her in an affectionate manner. All of them then turned to Borg for answers. The tree of life was the sacred tree bestowed upon the elven race by the goddess of life. It couldn't directly communicate through speech, yet it possessed an extremely potent divine nature. In the past, only the elven queens had been able to secure the approval of the tree of life, and Irina was the only elf to have been acknowledged by the tree even before inheriting the throne. A few days ago, Irina had been in a dire crisis in Rodu, and all of the elves present had witnessed the tree of life sending life energy to her despite how far away she was from the Wind Forest at the time. There was no way that a traitor who had cultivated dark magic would continue to be blessed by the tree of life, as dark magic originated from death, which stood on the opposite extreme to life. Irina turned to Helena with a serious expression, and asked, "High Priestess Helena, do you also think I cultivated dark magic? Do you also think I'm a traitor?" All of the elves also turned their attention to Helena. Aside from the panel of elders, the only being present who possessed the same level of influence as Borg was High Priestess Helena. "Princess Irina hasn't cultivated dark magic. There's no way that the aura of darkness could escape the detection of the Tree of Life. Helena shook her head as she said, as for whether Princess Irina is a traitor or not, I won't comment on that, as I have no evidence to suggest that to be the case. A hint of surprise appeared in Irina's eyes upon hearing this. She had thought that Helena would take this opportunity to contribute to her downfall, but that was not the case here. Borg cast a glance at Helena with a hint of wariness in his eyes. He had never been able to glean just what Helena's true objective was, and this time was no exception. Her Highness hasn't cultivated dark magic, so there's no way that she's a traitor. Not necessarily. She killed Master Schubert and Mater Kobel for the sake of those traitors. Why would she do that if she weren't a traitor? But Her Majesty has already abolished slavery and given everyone free will to leave or stay in the Wind Forest as they please. Are we really doing the right thing here by capturing and forcing them to endure this torture? They're traitors. They betrayed our faith, and they betrayed our Wind Forest. They should be forever branded as traitors, and their descendants will carry that shameful brand as well. They're not fit to be called elves, they're all just lowly slaves. That's right. They're all lowly slaves. Vehement cries rang out across the entire plaza again. There would occasionally be a few elves who tried to stand up for the elven slaves, but their voices were quickly drowned out by a sea of fury and prejudice. Borg's expression returned to normal as he turned to Irina. In a cold voice, he said, I don't know how you managed to swindle the Tree of Life, but it's not up to you to tell everyone whether you're a traitor or not. Her Majesty has gone into seclusion, so the panel of elders will be responsible for deciding all of the matters in our elven race. They will be the ones to pass judgment on you, and you must pay for what you've done. If all those who value freedom are branded as traitors, then I am indeed a traitor, just like all of those wandering elves who left the Wind Forest in pursuit of freedom. Irina looked at all of the elves present with a serious expression, and said, however, both our elven forefathers and the Goddess of Life have decreed that freedom is the soul of the elven race. They left the Wind Forest to pursue freedom, yet all of you are restricting the freedom of your brethren and oppressing them for your own personal gain. You are the traitors of the elven race. Freedom should be valued above all else. A life lived without restriction and oppression is what we should all aspire to. Elves who pursue things like power and wealth at the expense of their own brethren are the true traitors of the elven race. Irina's voice wasn't very loud, but it was clearly audible to every single elf in the Wind Forest. All of the elves present gradually fell silent as contemplative expressions appeared on their faces, and some of them were even hanging their heads with shame. She really is the spitting image of a younger version of Her Majesty. A reminiscent look appeared in Helena's eyes as she appraised Irina. Her mind wandered back to those days during which the Wind Forest had been ravaged by war and the Elven Queen had fought alongside her brethren. At the time, they had engaged in a heated argument about freedom at the foot of the Tree of Life. In the end, she had convinced the Elven Queen that her philosophy was correct, and the family system was thus established in the Wind Forest. What was freedom? That night, she had said to the Elven Queen, without power, how can there be freedom? Even to this day, she still stood firmly by her philosophy and beliefs, yet she no longer wanted to repeat those same words to Irina. Perhaps she really was getting old, or perhaps it was because the stubborn and willful Irina was different from the Elven Queen, after all. In any case, there was no point in engaging in some argument when she knew that Irina wouldn't agree with her viewpoints anyway. As for the freedom of the wandering elves outside the Wind Forest, how did that have anything to do with her? The freedom that she wanted was freedom for all those in the Wind Forest, and that freedom hinged entirely on keeping enemies away from the forest. The distance between the forest and its enemies was the freedom that she aspired to. All of the servants and slaves who were locked in underground cellars and prisons, as well as the troops on the most perilous borders, had also heard Irina's words. All of them had tears flowing down their faces and dripping onto the ground below. The abhorrent traitor brand had been forced upon them despite the fact that they had once fought so hard to protect the Wind Forest and the freedom of their brethren, the very same beings who were now repaying their efforts with animosity and oppression. At the conclusion of the war, they had chosen to leave this place where countless comrades and loved ones had been buried so they could search for their own freedom elsewhere. They wanted to forget the traumatic war they had endured by traveling the continent. Never would they have thought that their own brethren would have become the most prominent obstacle to that dream. All of a sudden, all of the elves who left the Wind Forest were deemed as traitors, and the orcs and demons who had once invaded the Wind Forest and slaughtered countless elves were being commissioned by none other than the elves to continue capturing more elves. Many of the free wandering elves all over the continent were horrifically slaughtered, and those who were lucky enough to have survived were tortured before being sold as auction items or sent back to the Wind Forest to become slaves. This was the beginning of a dark age for all wandering elves. The helpless elves had once hoped that their kind queen would put an end to all of this, but that didn't happen. The elven queen seemed to have remained oblivious to all of this, and she never even expressed her opinion on the matter. Perhaps she was the one who had ordered for all of the wandering elves to be captured in the first place. None of the elves knew the truth, as the elven queen barely appeared other than during the annual ceremonies. Thus, the major families became more and more powerful, and in order to satisfy their insatiable desires, more and more mercenary squads were employed to capture wandering elves, and those mercenary squads also became more and more reckless in their approach. In the face of the large number of mercenary squads, the wandering elves virtually had no power to resist. They were detained and brought back to the Wind Forest, branded as traitors and dark magic casters, and forced into slavery. The beautiful elves were chosen as servants to important figures in the elven race, while the elderly elves and those who were ordinary in appearance had the word traitor branded onto their faces before being reduced to slaves. The new elven laws enforced countless shackles on them, and the oppressive hierarchical system completely crushed their spirits, making them powerless to resist. Perhaps only the elves who had still retained some empathy in their hearts would be willing to help them, and the most renowned of those elves was undoubtedly Princess Irina. She scoured the continent for mercenary squads, destroying countless such squads in just a few years. All of the demons and orcs were so petrified by her crusade that all mercenary squads were disbanded for a time. She was like a ray of light that had shone onto the hearts of the wandering elves. Some of them were even beginning to imagine that if she were to become the elven queen one day, then all of this oppression would be over. They would be rid of their identities as traitors and slaves, and embark on a voyage to freedom once again. However, 3 years ago, Alex was killed, and Irina also virtually disappeared off the face of the continent. The mercenary squads that had been disbanded appeared again, and they began to capture wandering elves with reckless abandon. The ray of hope had been snuffed out, and everything was plunged into darkness and despair once again. However, 2 months ago, Irina reappeared. She slew Schubert and convinced the elven queen to abolish slavery, and then killed Kobyl and released all of the wandering elves that had been detained. These tales had rekindled the flames of hope in the hearts of all of the oppressed elves once again. They learned that there was still someone who was willing to fight for them, that there was still someone who remembered what all elves had been pursuing all along. Mag was still searching for ducks on Warden Lake when he suddenly cast a surprised glance toward the Wind Forest with narrowed eyes. Right at this moment, a pair of vibrant, colorful ducks suddenly flew out of a nearby spruce of reeds. "I've finally found you." Mag's eyes lit up before instructing the griffin to swoop downward, and he quickly locked his fingers around the neck of one of these ducks. This was a red-top tricolor duck. It was as plump as a goose, yet it looked as if someone had accidentally spilled a paint palette all over its body. As expected, it really was breathtakingly ugly. Mag tied the duck to the griffin's back before instructing, "Ozzy, turn around, we're going to the Wind Forest." "Nonsense!" Borg roared with rage to rouse all of the elves from their stunned stupor. All of the major family leaders wore complex expressions on their faces, yet they were more determined than ever. No one could make them relinquish the power and status that had been bestowed upon them. Irina was trying to take everything away from them, so she was their enemy. It was as simple as that. Borg wore a serious expression as he turned to the panel of elders, and said, "Esteemed elders, on behalf of all of the family leaders, I request for the deposition of Irina as the Elven princess, and also for her powers to be permanently disabled. Please give us your verdict. The Berman family requests for the deposition of Irina. The Earhart family requests for the deposition of Irina, and for severe punishment to be dealt to her. One family leader after another chimed in agreement. Among them were leaders from both the 8 major families as well as the smaller families, and almost half of them were in support of punishing Irina. Irina merely looked at everything with a disdainful expression on her face. The elder sitting at the center of the panel of elders slowly rose to his feet, and said, according to Elven laws, if more than 3 of the 8 major families have expressed their support for a proposed course of action, then the decision will come down to a vote among the panel of elders. All elders, please state your stance on this matter. Irina's actions are completely unbefitting of her status, so she's not fit to continue as the Elven princess. I support her deposition. I concur. Irina has obstructed our plan to bring traitors back to our wind forest on many occasions, and she has killed many of our brethren for no good reason. Her magic should be disabled as a punishment. I support her deposition. Her actions have made her an enemy of our Elven race, and she must be punished. I disagree. As the successor to Her Highness, she should be the one to pass judgment. We have no right to decide her fate. The elders expressed their opinions one after another. Helena remained completely silent and expressionless throughout this process, making it impossible to decipher what she was thinking. It was quite clear that support for Irina's deposition far outweighed the opposition, and all of the elves on the plaza looked on in silence, knowing that the outcome had virtually already been decided. However, no one knew just what implications this outcome would have for the Elven race. 5 days ago, Irina had slain 3 10th-tier powerhouses out of a total of 6 who had attacked her in Rodu. Immediately thereafter, Alex had appeared to kill the remaining 3 10th-tier beings along with Benson, following which both of them had escaped relatively unscathed. Bork and Helena were both present, and there were more than 6 10th-tier Elven beings at the scene, but everyone was still feeling a sense of unease. Furthermore, Irina was the only Elven princess, and she had always been viewed as the hope and pillar for the future of the Elven race. If she were to be killed or crippled, the Elven race would essentially be shooting itself in the foot. Where would they go from there? Irina wanted to abolish the family system and restore the social system of old, thereby pitting herself against all of the Elven families. No one knew how much longer the Elven Queen was going to be around for. If they were to lose Irina as well, what was going to become of them? This was a serious problem that weighed on the hearts of all of the elves present. What was even more unsettling to all of the high-ranking elves was the notion of revenge from an enraged Alex if they were to really kill or disable Irina. Normal elves might not be aware of the extent of the relationship between Irina and Alex, but they knew that Irina had suddenly become so feeble after returning to the Wind Forest 3 years ago as she had given birth to Alex's child. It was exactly because of this that the assassination that shocked the entire continent had been arranged. However, Alex had now been revealed to still be alive, and he had announced his return in the most emphatic fashion by killing 4 10th-tier powerhouses. He was a terrifyingly powerful man, and if he were to aim his blade at the Elven race, disaster would surely follow. All of the young elves looked on as Irina stood before the spring of life with her hands clasped behind her back. Her long dress fluttered around her, and she was still just as proud and powerful as well. She was like a shining beacon of light in the hearts of many elves, and they couldn't bring themselves to resent her no matter what. In the past, they could only look up to her and exchange legendary stories about her in an awestruck manner, but now, they were beginning to understand what she had been doing all this time. She had climbed to the pinnacle of the Magus Tower, and then departed from the Wind Forest to travel across the entire Norland continent. She had slain countless demons and orcs, battled giant dragons, and freed countless elven traitors. All of these rebellious tales surrounding her were merely detailing her pursuit of freedom. Her definition of freedom was not one that required justification. In their hearts, the lowly slaves who they'd insulted with reckless abandon and taken for granted suddenly became a little different. This was like a seed that had been sowed in everyone's hearts. The elder at the very center of the panel elders rose to his feet again, and loudly announced, 8 elders have approved of deposing Irina as princess and punishing her for her crimes, while only 3 have raised objections. As such, from now on, Irina will be stripped of her title as the Elven princess with immediate effect. On top of that, her mind realm will be destroyed, and she'll be imprisoned in the Tower of Death for the rest of her life for killing Schubert and Kobil. The entire plaza fell deathly silent. Even though they'd achieved their objective, everyone was feeling extremely tense as they appraised Irina with wary expressions on their faces. Contrary to her appearance, she wasn't some frail and vulnerable little girl. Instead, she was a monstrously powerful being who was not to be taken lightly. Even more importantly, she had the support of the Tree of Life. Irina appraised the panel of elders with a pair of eyes that were devoid of fear yet tinged with a hint of disappointment. This is the most incompetent panel of elders I've ever seen. The elder at the center of the panel, who was already over 900 years old, took a reflexive step backward. All of the other elders also averted Irina's gaze, not daring to look her in the eye. Irina turned away from the elders and cast her gaze toward the elves on the plaza. She then looked on toward a place that was even further away. My brethren, I hope you can all find the kindness and benevolence that have been buried deep in your hearts. I hope that one day, you can once again befriend the flora and fauna in the forest, and use your hearts to experience everything around you. Only then will you return to being true elves rather than demons wearing elven skin. I want this to be more than just a revolution from myself. I want all of you who are being oppressed to pick up your weapons, and unite to fight for your freedom. Irina's warm voice spread through the entire wind forest, and a burst of golden light radiated from her body as if a golden veil had been draped over her. The Tree of Life lit up, and countless branches emerged from within the cave. Specks of green light rained down from the branches, fluttering around Irina's body like sprightly fireflies. What insolence! I'm going to avenge Schubert and Kobil today on behalf of the panel of elders. Borg's brows furrowed as a black wand appeared in his hand. He raised the wand, and a beam of black light shot forth toward Irina. The black light split up into 3 mid-flight, then into 9, and these 9 streaks of black light transformed into 9 black cheetahs. Each of these cheetahs was around 3 meters in length, and all of them pounced toward Irina in unison. The cheetahs bared their sinister fangs and sharp claws as they hurtled toward Irina at a speed that was far too fast for the naked eye to follow, leaving trails of afterimages in their wake. A staff also appeared in Irina's hand, and she looked at the oncoming cheetahs in a calm manner as she chanted, "Holy light, cleanse." Golden light flashed within the crystal at the tip of the staff, and a cylindrical pillar of golden light swept forth toward the oncoming cheetahs, all of which were instantly vanquished like shattered crystals. The entire area was completely cleared with the exception of a few insubstantial wisps of black energy. All of the specks of green light around Irina seemed to have come under some kind of stimulus, and all of them surged forth in an instant to destroy those remaining traces of black energy. All of a sudden, Irina's eyes narrowed slightly as a hint of confusion appeared on her face. "Is that what I think it is?" A grave expression also appeared on Helena's face. Borg raised his wand high above his head, and his magician robes flapped around him in the wind as he roared, "All traitors must be punished regardless of their position and status." The sky instantly darkened as countless dark clouds surged forth, forming a gargantuan vortex overhead, creating a menacing doomsday-like scenario. 846 If something happens to her, I'll slaughter the entire elven race. Light and dark clashed in a fearsome explosion as magic waves surged through the air. After everything fell silent again, the darkness had vanished, as had the light. Irina was standing behind the spring of life, but she retreated a few meters, and her face was slightly pale. There was a trace of blood trickling down the corner of her lips, and her hand was trembling slightly as she held onto her staff while struggling to remain on her feet. The green light around her had already vanished, and the Tree of Life had withdrawn all of its branches. In contrast, Borg was still standing on the same spot, and he stepped forward as he looked at Irina, and said, "You're very powerful, but unfortunately, you made the wrong choice." Irina had been defeated. All of the elves looked on with different expressions on their faces. Borg wasn't saying this to add insult to injury. At just 30 years of age, Irina was indeed extremely powerful. Among all of the other elves present, no one could defeat her aside from perhaps Helena. Even though Borg had won, he had most likely still sustained some rather severe injuries. "I made all of the choices that I believe to be correct." Irina stood up straight as she narrowed her eyes, and asked, "What is that lurking inside your body?" Borg's pupils contracted slightly upon hearing this question, and he pointed his wand at Irina again as he yelled, "In that case, you can take your choices to your grave. Princess, run!" Right at this moment, an armored guard suddenly drew his sword before charging toward Borg. He raised his sword high above his head with both hands before bringing it down in a vicious strike. Borg was slightly startled by this development, and he turned his wand away from Irina, directing it toward the oncoming guard instead. A burst of black light shot forth from the tip of his wand, instantly shattering the guard's black metal visor. A deep puncture wound was then blasted into the guard's glabella, and his body jerked back violently before tumbling to the ground. Blood flowed from his glabella, slowly staining the slave brand on his face. He turned to Irina with difficulty, and with his final dying breath, he urged, "Princess, run." As soon as his voice fell, his soul left his body, yet his eyes remained wide open even in death. All of the elves looked on in silence. If the slaves were to revolt? A hint of horror welled up from the bottoms of their hearts at this harrowing notion. "You bastard!" Irina screamed as she looked at the guard who was lying in a puddle of his own blood. Her lips were trembling slightly, and faint golden light began to shimmer from her staff. What an abhorrent slave! Borg flexed his neck from side to side as he cast a disdainful glance at the dead guard, and then raised his wand toward Irina again as he chuckled coldly. "I'm going to kill all of these filthy rebellious slaves, and then we'll see who's going to save you." A hint of fear crept into the eyes of all of the elves as they looked at Borg. Elliot and Vincent exchanged a glance, and both of them could see their own concern mirrored in each other's eyes. They then turned to Helena, only to find that her expression remained completely calm and placid as if the scenes unfolding right now had nothing to do with her. If Irina were to die, the entire elven race was going to be tipped on its head. Helena was the only one present who was capable of stopping Borg, but she showed no intention of doing so. As such, Irina's fate was sealed. A sinister smile appeared on Borg's face as he raised his wand before him, and black light began to shimmer from the tip of the wand. Irina's staff was also shimmering with faint golden light, but it wasn't able to muster up any power. Right at this moment, a thunderous voice suddenly rang out up above. "Let me see who would dare to kill her on my watch." A purple-striped griffin came swooping down at an alarming speed, sweeping up fierce winds with its powerful wings that buffeted all of the nearby trees to the side. Blades of wind sent countless splinters flying through the air, and the massive griffin hurtled directly toward Borg. "Alex!" Borg's heart jolted with shock as he directed his wand toward the griffin while attempting to evade. The expressions on the faces of the nearby elves changed drastically as they dispersed in a blind panic. Borg had reacted quite quickly, but the griffin was far too fast in the end. It snuffed out the faint glimmer of black light that had formed on the tip of Borg's wand with its powerful wings, and then lashed out with its sharp talons, which were gleaming with a metallic light. The talons tore through a dozen or so layers of magic shields in an instant, and then punctured Borg's shoulder before swatting him away like an oversized fly. Borg's burly frame was sent hurtling through the air before being embedded deep in a mountain face. A few elves hurriedly scrambled to position themselves in front of Borg before looking up at the griffin and its fearsome rider with horror in their eyes. All of the elves were feeling extremely panicked, and no one dared to do anything that could be potentially reckless in this situation. The griffin circled around in midair before landing by Irina's side. A man holding a claymore jumped down from the griffin's back before encircling an arm around Irina's waist. He wore a set of black robes, as well as a black and white mask on his face, and he said in a charismatic voice, "I'm here." "He's so cool." A certain young female elf in the crowd was completely captivated by Mag's grand entrance, and her shimmering eyes reflected the emotions of countless other young elven women present. Irina stared at the man beside her with a slightly blank expression on her face, wondering how and why he had suddenly appeared here. He clearly hadn't recovered to anywhere near the height of his powers, but he had swooped down without a second thought to stand by her side in her time of need. This was the second time that he had saved her from a dire situation, and tears were beginning to well up in her eyes. Mag wore a sympathetic expression as he looked at Irina's pale face and the faint trace of trickling down from the corner of her lips. In a gentle voice, he said, "I'll get you out of here." Irina returned to her senses and looked into the pair of gentle eyes that were peeking through the mask as she shook her head, and said, "I can't go." Mag's brows furrowed with befuddlement as he asked, "Why not?" Irina looked back at Mag with a determined look in her eyes, and replied, "The Tree of Life needs me, as do all of the oppressed elves in the Wind Forest. She still has you, but they only have me." Right at this moment, dazzling green light suddenly erupted from the Tree of Life inside the cave. The green light illuminated the entire cave, but there seemed to be a wisp of black light that was struggling and shimmering within it. "Your Highness!" Firis rushed out of the cave and stumbled toward Irina with a panicked expression on her face. Irina turned toward Firis before giving Mag a gentle hug as she whispered into his ear, "Take Firis away from here, I'll be fine." "All right." Mag nodded before grabbing onto Firis's wrist, and then looked on as Irina made her way toward the cave that the Tree of Life was situated in. "Princess! Let go of me! I have to be with Princess Irina." "Princess!" Firis had tears streaming uncontrollably down her face, struggled with all her might to rush toward Irina, but her wrist was caught in a vice-like grip by Mag. Irina strode into the cave, and a green light barrier appeared to seal up the cave's opening. Mag withdrew his gaze before turning to appraise all of the wary elves with a cold look in his eyes. His gaze lingered on Helena for a moment before he wound an arm around the struggling Firis and leaped onto the griffin's back with her. "If something happens to her, I'll slaughter the entire elven race," Mag vowed in a thunderous voice. All of the elves averted their eyes involuntarily, and Borg, who had just been pulled out of the mountain face, took a couple of steps backward with a look of shock and horror on his face. He hurriedly hid himself behind another terrified elf, but Mag didn't even take a single glance at him before the griffin spread its wings and quickly disappeared into the distant sky. 847. Do you want to become an enemy of our entire race? The entire plaza was deathly silent, and all of the elves wore fearful expressions on their faces. They were clearly only facing a single person, but his threat struck everyone with a sense of asphyxiation as if the entire sky had fallen on them. This was a man who was once known as the most powerful being on the entire continent. He'd been declared dead 3 years ago, but following his return, he was just as terrifying as ever. He didn't even need to dirty his own hands, as just a single attack from his griffin steed had been enough to severely injure Borg, who had apparently once fought Alex to a draw. Everything that had happened thus far had been completely unexpected to all of the elves present. Princess Irina's abolition, her subsequent battle against Borg, Alex's grand entrance to save Irina before severely wounding Borg. Everything had developed in such an abrupt fashion that no one could have predicted what was going to happen next. At this moment, the opening of the cave had been obscured by a vast expanse of murky green light, thereby making it impossible to see what was happening inside. The life energy that normally poured forth relentlessly from within the cave had also been cut off as if an invisible wall had been erected. The Tree of Life had virtually cut off all of its ties with the outside world, and even the gentle green light that it was perpetually emanating had disappeared without a trace. Right at this moment, an elf exclaimed in a panicked manner, "The spring of life has run dry." All of the elves' hearts jolted upon hearing this, and they hurriedly turned their attention to the spring of life, only to find that it had indeed completely dried out. Only the slightly damp ground where the spring of life had once been indicated that it had ever existed in the first place, and the constant flow of the spring of life had completely ceased. What do we do? The great elder of the elven race was in a blind panic. The spring of life has run dry. This is a sign that extreme ill fortune will soon befall our entire race, an elderly elf within the crowd croaked in a horrified voice. All of the other elves also wore expressions of fear and unease on their faces. Their queen had gone into seclusion, their princess had been deposed, the tree of life had cut off its connection with the outside world, and now, the spring of life had run dry. All of these events had taken place in such a short span of time, and one simply couldn't help but fear for the worst. I heard that the spring of life has run dry on 3 occasions in the history of the elven race. Each time this has occurred, the entire elven race has been afflicted by a disastrous ordeal. The last time the spring of life ran dry was over 1,000 years ago, and immediately after that, the 1,000-year-long war among species ensued, a certain elf said in a feeble voice. Panic and unease soon began to spread through the entire crowd. Everyone turned their attention toward Borg and Helena, the latter of which was standing on the platform with a grim expression on her face. The queen had gone into seclusion and the princess had been deposed. As such, these two were the only ones in the race that could make some decisions. As for the panel of elders, all of the elves knew that half of them pledged their allegiance to Borg while the other half were under Helena's control, so these two were still the ones who were going to make the final decision. The gruesome wound on Borg's shoulder had already stopped bleeding, but his tattered and blood-stained clothes still presented quite a sorry sight. He shrugged off the elf who was holding onto his arm to support him, and a sinister expression on his face as he strode forward before pointing a finger at the nearby cave. That demonic witch, Irina, must be responsible for making the spring of life run dry. We have to kill her, and only then will we be able to avert the ordeal that is to come. The leaders of the major families were all rather hesitant initially, but after the leader of the Berman family stepped forward to voice his support for Borg, all of the other family leaders chimed in. That's right. We have to kill Irina. However, all of the ordinary elves were still feeling quite panicked, and they didn't dare to say anything. All of the events that recently unfolded struck them with a strong sense of foreboding, and if they were to kill Irina now, who'd be able to stop Alex from exacting his revenge on the entire elven race? Borg? No, he clearly wasn't powerful enough. But who could stop Borg, who had become rather deranged at this point? Everyone looked on as a group of powerful beings followed Borg toward the cave, and no one dared to say anything. Kill Irina to avert this crisis, all of Borg's supporters chanted in unison as they strode toward the cave with furious expressions. Among them, there were Borg's followers as well as elves who had been driven to the point of irrationality by fear, and simply wanted the spring of life to begin flowing again. Compared to the terrifying unknown future that awaited the elven race, Alex suddenly didn't seem to be all that fearsome. Meanwhile, all of the other elves looked on with blank expressions, clearly at a loss for what to do. Break this seal and kill her. Borg pointed a finger at the green light barrier in the cave with a deranged look on his face. Kill her. All of the other elves behind him seemed to have also gone insane as they pointed their wands toward the cave. Lights of different colors began to appear on the tips of their wounds, and there was no lack of 10th tier magic casters among them. With so many powerful magic casters combining their powers at once, there was no way that this seal would be able to withstand their collective assault. Some of the elves had even closed their eyes, unable to bear watching these tragic scenes any further. Regardless of whether it was Princess Irina or the Tree of Life, no one wanted to see them perish. Right at this moment, someone suddenly appeared in front of the cave and positioned herself before everyone. It was none other than Helena, who had barely even spoken at all this entire time. She stood in front of the opening of the cave and appraised the elves before her in a calm manner. All of the elves who were just about to unleash their magic hurriedly stopped what they were doing before looking at Helena with bewilderment and confusion on their faces. Borg's expression also stiffened slightly, and his brows furrowed as he asked, "What are you doing, High Priestess Helena? Borg, do you want to become an enemy of our entire race?" Helena looked at Borg with a grave expression as she said, according to the rules stipulated by our elven ancestors, all those who inflict damage upon the Tree of Life of the Spring of Life will be regarded as public enemies by the entire elven race. Your battle with Irina has already harmed the Tree of Life, yet you're going to forcibly break through the barrier set up by the Tree of Life now. Are you trying to kill the Tree of Life once and for all? Helena then turned to the elves behind Borg, and continued, the Tree of Life is extremely weak both in its offensive and defensive abilities. This barrier has been materialized by the very essence of the Tree of Life. If you break it, the Tree of Life will die. Do you all want that to happen? All of the elves' expressions changed drastically as they hurriedly put down their wands. Killing Irina and killing the Tree of Life were two entirely different concepts. The latter would bring about consequences that no one could shoulder, not even Borg. The Tree of Life gave rise to the entire elven race, and it was the spokesperson of the goddess of life in this world. If they were to kill it, the elven race could be abandoned by the goddess of life, and the killers of the tree would become the biggest sinners in the entire elven race. Borg's expression changed several times as he looked at Helena, but in the end, his clenched fists relaxed as he relaxed. I have nothing but the utmost respect for the Tree of Life, and I am only doing this so I can hold Irina accountable for her crimes. However, seeing as you're saying my actions could harm the Tree of Life, then I will naturally refrain from continuing in this endeavor. I still have some injuries that I must attend to, so I'll be taking my leave now. After casting a final glance at the cave, Borg turned to leave. The welfare of the elven race is paramount. No one can be allowed to cross that line, Irina said in a calm voice as she looked on at Borg's departing figure. Borg's footsteps faltered slightly upon hearing this before he continued to depart. Howling winds whistled past the griffin, and its two riders sat on its back in silence. Fira's eyes were bright red from crying, and there were still tears streaming uncontrollably down on her face, dripping onto her clothes. However, she remained completely silent, not even uttering a single sob as she stared up at the black-robed man sitting before her. His black robes were flapping in the wind, and she could only see half of his mask from this angle, so she didn't know what he looked like. However, the mask gave her quite a forbidding feeling, making her too afraid to say anything. This was the man who the princess missed day and night, and she had even given birth to this man's child. Firas had heard countless legends about him. Even though he was only a human, he'd become the greatest hero in the hearts of countless women under the heavens. However, Firas didn't care about all that. In fact, she detested him. It was all because of him the princess had almost died 3 years ago. It was all because of him that the princess was being detested by so many people, and now, the princess had even been deposed because of him. And what did he do in return? He abandoned the princess and took her instead. How did a man like this deserve the princess? She wanted to go back. Even if she were pitifully weak, she wanted to stay by Irina's side, just to act as a meat shield for her if possible. However, she couldn't even see the wind forest now. She had never left the wind forest in her life, so she wouldn't even be able to find her way back to her home. As such, she became even more resentful toward this black-robed man. A real man would never abandon his woman and run away on his own, especially when he was a powerful griffin-riding knight. Mag turned around in a calm manner to look into eyes of the weeping Firas, and he asked, "Do you hate me?" Firas' heart shuddered slightly with fear as she looked into his eyes. Regardless of how much she resented him, he was still one of the most powerful beings on the entire continent, so she couldn't help fearing him. However, she then thought of her princess, and a surge of courage suddenly welled up in her heart as she interrogated, "Why didn't you take the princess away? Do you know how long she waited for you? How could you leave her there all by herself? They've gone insane. They're going to kill her. Do you understand, you bastard?" Mag looked at the infuriated Firas, and a wry smile appeared on his face. It was quite remarkable that a servant dared to speak to him despite knowing who he was, and that she was so desperate to remain by Irina's side, even though doing so would spell certain death for her. However, he couldn't do anything. He respected Irina's decision to stay in the Wind Forest, and in any case, he didn't have the power to forcibly take her away. In fact, he didn't even dare to remain in the Wind Forest for too long in case his cover was blown. He was like a dog that was all bark with no bite, and his words could only intimidate others as long as they weren't aware of his actual power level. He knew that Irina was a smart woman who would protect herself, but it was just as Firas had said, he was indeed a bastard for leaving her behind. He couldn't even compare with this servant of hers, who was determined to remain by her side until the bitter end. He couldn't afford to do that as he had to go back alive to Amy, who was waiting for him at home. He had to cast aside all of his impulses and calm himself down so he could make the right decision. This was not the time to throw everything away in the heat of the moment. Instead, he had to see the bigger picture. She'll be fine, and I'll rescue her for sure. Mag looked at Firas as he said in a gentle voice, "For now, I'm going to take you to Chaos City, which will be a safe haven for you. Find a way to survive, and you'll be reunited with Irina in the future. I'm going to go back to the Wind Forest to protect the princess." Firas countered in a stubborn manner. "If you don't want to see her getting hurt because of you, then I suggest you don't do that," Mag said in a calm voice before turning away and falling silent again. Firas opened her mouth to say something, but she was at a loss for words. She turned back in the direction that they'd come from, and her tears began to flow again as she sobbed, "Princess! I'm so useless. She'll be fine, right?" Mag was also quite concerned as he cast his gaze into the distance. There was a huge claymore strapped to his back, while two extremely eye-catching red-top tricolor ducks that were still struggling were bound to the griffin's back beside his left foot. After crying for a while, Firas confirmed that there was no way to get down from the griffin's back safely, and decided that she would indeed only weigh Irina down even if she were to return to the Wind Forest. After coming to terms with her situation, her attention was drawn to the ugly ducks, and a series of random thoughts flashed through her mind. Why did he catch those two ugly ducks? Where's the young mistress? Could it be that he caught those ducks for the young mistress to eat? Are they living in Chaos City? If I can't serve the princess, can I serve the young mistress instead? However, Mag made no effort to explain himself. In fact, he didn't even say anything else for the rest of the journey. After flying for around 2 hours, a grand city appeared on the horizon, and the griffin began its descent. At this point, Firas had been hesitating for a long while, and she finally mustered up her courage as she asked, Can I look after the young mistress?" Mag turned around with a rather surprised expression to find Firas looking at him with a beseeching look of anticipation in her eyes. It seemed that she'd found a new purpose, and her frail body was filled with strength again. "No," Mag replied in a quick and concise manner. Firas' hopeful expression instantly crumbled, and tears began to well up in her eyes again. "I'm going to test you for a period of time. If you can live by yourself in Chaos City, then perhaps I'll give you a chance. I'm not going to allow someone who can't even look after herself to look after my daughter," Mag continued in a calm voice. Firas' eyes lit up with renewed hope, and she looked at Mag with an earnest expression as she promised, "I'll be sure to work hard and thrive in Chaos City." Mag nodded before turning around again as the griffin began to swoop downward. Down below, in Chaos City. "Look! What is that? It looks like a griffin? But why isn't it stopping outside the city? Am I seeing this right? There seem to be purple stripes on that griffin." "Purple stripes? Purple stripes? That's a purple-striped griffin. Is that Alex? It must be him. There's only one purple-striped griffin in this entire world, so its rider has to be Alex." A massive stir quickly ran through the entire city. Everyone looked up at the descending griffin with excitement on their faces. "Get ready for battle." In contrast, the soldiers on the city walls were growing quite tense, and all of them tightened their grips on their spears in the face of this potential enemy. The griffin landed on the city wall, and Mag rose to his feet as he turned to Pyrrhus, and said, "Go." Pyrrhus nodded in a solemn manner before carefully sliding down the wing of the griffin. Mag looked around at the wary soldiers and the countless pairs of eyes looking up at him from down below, and announced, "From this day forth, I, Alex, will begin hunting all beings and groups that capture wandering elves against their will." 849 Please have some shame, old man. Deep underground, there was a dark winding tunnel that seemed to be leading infinitely downward. At the end of the tunnel, a burly figure stood before a spacious cave with a ball of dark green ghostly flames hovering before him. The green flames cast exaggerated shadows onto his face, giving him an extremely sinister appearance. "Didn't you say that you'd grant me immeasurable power if I gave you my soul? Why was it so hard for me to defeat Irina? Why was it that even Alex's steed could send me flying with ease? Was everything just a lie?" Borg roared at the ghostly flames with an enraged expression on his face. The green fireball twisted and warped before transforming into a skull, which replied in an enchanting voice, "Don't be in such a rush, everything is still under our control. If you had used death magic in the prior battle and been caught doing so by those idiots, you'd have lost everything you currently have, so we refrained from helping you at that time. However, we've already successfully infiltrated the Tree of Life, and all you have to do is wait until we take control of the tree, then use the Tree of Life to control Irina and the Elven Queen. After that, everything in the Elven race will belong to you, including those two. When that time comes, you will be the sole ruler of the Elven race and the only king in the history of the Elven race." As the skull's captivating voice rang out within the cave, the fury in Borg's eyes gradually vanished, and a peculiar smile appeared on his face as wisps of dark green light emerged deep within his pupils. "I'm going to become the ruler of the Elven race. Only I am worthy of becoming the Elven king. You're injured, so allow us to treat your wounds." Death magic doesn't just represent death, in reality, it also possesses life force that even life magic cannot hope to compare with. The coarse voice reverberated throughout the cave as wisps of dark green light flowed toward Borg from the skull, and the dark green light with his eyes gradually darkened even further. At the same time, all of the grass all over the territory of the Borg family almost instantly died and withered away. The supple trees also shrank drastically as if all of their moisture content had disappeared, yet no one was around to witness these unsettling scenes. What was that dark aura within Borg's magic? It seems to be different from the magic that he used in the past, but I can't put my finger on exactly how it's different. It's like a certain unique power has been intermingled with his magic, but just what is that power? Within the starry cave, Helena looked up at a certain bright star above her with tightly furrowed brows. "Hetty, get my star disk," and, Helena's voice suddenly cut off as she looked around at her empty cave, and then fell silent again. Within a secret chamber, Vincent looked into Elliot's eyes, and said, "The princess has been deposed, and Mistress Helena has also shown us her stance. This is perhaps an opportunity for our two families. During this time, the Baybilly family will strongly support young Mistress Sally in a bid to make her the new Elven princess. In exchange, I hope you can promise me something. If young Mistress Sally becomes the Elven Queen in the future, she must announce the Baybilly family as the second most powerful family in the Elven below your Brewster family." Elliot looked into Vincent's eyes in silence for a moment before nodding in a solemn manner. "If that day does come, our Brewster family will be sure to repay your Baybilly family." A smile appeared on Vincent's face as he nodded, and said, "All right, looks like I'll need to make a trip to Chaos City in person." In front of the entrance of Mamie Restaurant, a young man was looking at a pair of dejected men standing before the restaurant as he consoled, "Don't bother waiting, Boss Mag has gone out to procure ingredients, and his restaurant will only open again tomorrow, so just come back then." These two men wore ragged clothes with bumps and bruises all over their bodies, and at first glance, it appeared as if they'd just crawled out of some ancient forest. It was quite apparent from their distraught expressions at the sight of the notice plastered on the door of the restaurant that they were clearly intending to have a meal there. Arg! Is there no God in this world? I endured so many hardships to finally get here, how could Boss Mag be away? This is too much for me to bear. Abraham looked up into the sky with tears streaming down his agonized face as he clasped a hand over his heart. He and his beast tamer had spent an entire night crawling out of the valley they'd fallen into, and only when the sun had begun to rise did they encounter a group of kind-hearted travelers who took them to Chaos City. They had thought that this would be the end of their misfortune, only to be dealt another heavy blow. Abraham's body swayed, and he almost collapsed to the ground. The beast tamer beside him hurriedly latched onto his arm to help Abraham remain on his feet, and then hung his head with shame. He had already mentally prepared himself, and he knew that he'd be lucky not to be executed following this trip to Chaos City. At the very least, he was definitely out of a job. During this trip, he'd learned a valuable lesson that applied to beast tamers. A good beast tamer had to be responsible for feeding their steed. Otherwise, their master would feed the steed to the point of obesity. Mag's return to Chaos City and his public announcement to hunt down all groups that captured wandering elves naturally drew widespread attention. The purple-striped griffin evoked a sense of awe and veneration in the hearts of all onlookers, and the man standing on the griffin's back drew countless pairs of reverent eyes. Chaos City has only just made an official announcement that they're going to be taking in wandering elves, and now, Master Alex has appeared here and announced that he's going to be hunting down groups that are capturing wandering elves. Could this be a mere coincidence? Could it be that Alex has already forged an alliance with Chaos City? Or is he doing this for the elven princess? I only heard just a few days ago that Alex was still alive. I can't believe I'm seeing him in Chaos City now. I can boast about this for an entire year. Erg! He's so handsome. Even though he's wearing a mask, his perfect figure makes me want to part my legs for him. Please have some shame, old man. The entire Chaos City was in a frenzy as those who had heard the news of Alex's arrival rushed out of their houses, and then swarmed toward the northern city walls so they could catch a glimpse of the legendary dragon slayer for themselves. Alex is here? How interesting. Within the city lord's castle, Michael cast a surprised glance toward the northern part of the city with a smile on his face. That guy came to Chaos City. Inside a classroom in Chaos City, Krasu was also looking out toward the northern city wall in a distracted manner. Boom! All of a sudden, a fireball exploded before Krasu, instantly setting his beard alight. Arg! Krasu was quite startled by this, and he hurriedly waved a hand through the air to extinguish the flames. He then looked at the charred beard with a depressed look on his face as he said, "And here I was making such an effort to try and grow out my beard again. You told me that one shouldn't get distracted while practicing magic, Master Halfbeard," Amy said as she splayed her hands out before her in an innocent manner. Krasu looked at Amy's adorable little face, and simply couldn't bear to scold or punish her. Furthermore, it was indeed true that he'd allowed himself to get distracted just then. That accursed Alex! Next time I see him, I'm going to make him buy me some fine wine. Krasu thought to himself in an enraged manner. Alex! Conti Nicholas, will definitely become a dragon slayer just like you. A fanatical voice suddenly sounded from at the foot of the city wall, and everyone turned in that direction to discover a fully armored donkey-riding knight looking up at Alex with excitement shimmering in his eyes. Everyone immediately burst into laughter at the sight of that comical combination. No matter how anyone looked at it, this donkey rider certainly didn't seem capable of killing a giant dragon. Mag was just about to depart when he looked down with a hint of surprise in his eyes. The smile on Conti's face remained as bright as ever, and he seemed to be completely unfazed by the derisive laughter around him. You've got a good steed, Conti Nicholas. I've remembered your name, and I hope that when I see this name again, it'll be Dragon Slayer Conti Nicholas, Mag said with a smile, and then glanced at Ferris before flying away atop his purple-striped griffin. An incredulous silence settled over the entire crowd as everyone stared at Conti with disbelief in their eyes. They couldn't believe that a donkey-riding knight like him had been acknowledged by Alex. Could it be that he had some powerful abilities that he'd been hiding from everyone? I'll make sure of it. Conti's smile widened even further as he looked on at the departing griffin, then turned around, and rode away on his donkey steed. Following Alex's departure, all of the surrounding spectators also gradually dispersed. However, Alex's arrival in Chaos City and the public announcement that he had just made was most definitely going to be hot topic on everyone's lips for quite some time to come. Firis withdrew her gaze and turned to the wary soldiers on the city wall around her as she said in a calm manner, "I wish to seek refuge in Chaos City." A man who appeared to be a leader among the soldiers made his way toward Firis, and said, "Please come with me, I'll take you to the city lord's castle." Firis nodded before following him down the city wall, and the two of them traveled toward the city lord's castle. "Don't worry, princess, I'll be sure to thrive in Chaos City, then look after the young mistress, and we'll both be waiting for you to come and find us," Firis vowed inwardly in a determined manner. Just as the entirety of Chaos City was still basking in the vastly pleasant surprise of Alex's visit, Mag had changed back into his normal clothes, and was riding along a small mountain path on his bike. The two red-top tricolor ducks were strapped to the handlebars of the bicycle, and they'd already fallen unconscious from the bumpy ride. That performance just then wasn't just something that Mag had put on in the heat of the moment, he really did want to do something. He wanted to play a role and do his part in helping all of the oppressed wandering elves all over the continent. His declaration coupled with the official announcement made by Chaos City should be able to intimidate all of the orc and demon mercenary squads, thereby creating a safer environment for all of the vulnerable wandering elves. Chaos City had opened a door to these wandering elves, but in doing so, they'd also given these mercenary squads an alluring target. If he and Chaos City didn't do anything, the wandering elves all over the continent could be harmed even more than in the past. "It's time to reverse the roles of hunter and prey," Mag murmured to himself. He then looked at a pair of ducks hanging from his handlebars, and his mood was lifted significantly as he asked internally, "I've caught these two ducks, so I've completed the mission, right, system? Congratulations on capturing two red-top tricolor ducks within the allotted time period. As your reward, you will receive a Chuanjude Peking duck recipe as well as all of the ingredients and kitchenware required to cook the dish," the system replied. Mag's smile widened even further as he looked at the golden experience bag that had just appeared in his mind. Peking duck was one of Mag's all-time favorite dishes. Bianu Fang and Quanjude's Peking duck dishes each had their own unique flavors, but among the two, Mag had a slight preference for Quanjude's Peking duck. Bianu Fang was the oldest restaurant in Beijing to have begun cooking Peking duck, and they had a history of over 600 years. Their roast ducks were cooked in a sealed oven, and throughout the entire cooking process, the ducks couldn't be checked on, nor could they be moved, so timing and temperature control were imperative. A good Bianu Fang roast duck had crispy skin over a soft and juicy interior, making for a brilliant culinary experience when coupled with fresh vegetables and condiments. In contrast, Quanjude's roast ducks were cooked by being hung over open flame ovens, and the restaurant had successfully made Peking duck a renowned dish worldwide. Mag had also visited other popular new roast ducks restaurants in the past few years, but Quanjude's traditional roast duck dish was still his favorite. However, not long ago, Chuanjude began to roast their ducks using electrical ovens, thereby making the dish lose its soul in Mag's eyes. That was very disappointing to him, and he very rarely visited the restaurant thereafter. Mag was very much looking forward to learning this recipe as the system had guaranteed that this was the traditional Peking duck recipe as opposed to the recipe for the same dish cooked in an electrical oven. Just the thought of being able to make perfect Chuanjude Peking duck on his own was making Mag very excited. Thus, Mag rode his bicycle back to the city gates in an inconspicuous manner, and a faint smile appeared on his face as he overheard the spirited conversations regarding Alex's recent visit. If these people were made aware of the fact that he was Alex, all of their beliefs would probably crumble in a heap. Right at this moment, someone near the city gates suddenly yelled, "Giant dragon!" Mag looked up to find a rather familiar frost dragon flying over from afar, then descending before adopting its human form, and sending everyone scurrying away with the frosty aura that was emanating from its body. "It's her!" Mag was rather surprised to find that this was none other than Elizabeth. This wasn't his first time seeing a giant dragon anymore, so he was no longer struck by a sense of fear. Furthermore, Elizabeth occasionally visited his restaurant for a meal, and she seemed to very interested in Mia, which was why Mag had a strong impression of her. Elizabeth glanced at Mag, but didn't greet him as she walked directly past him. However, just as she'd walked through the city gates, she suddenly stopped as she turned to a portly middle-aged man standing off to the side, and then asking in a cold voice, "Did you just say Alex came to Chaos City?" The middle-aged man was only an ordinary merchant, and he was petrified by Elizabeth's cold glare. Even his voice was trembling as he replied, He was here not long ago, but he's already left. Where did he go?" Elizabeth's hands balled up into tight fists, and her voice grew even colder. There were even traces of ice and frost that were beginning to spread along the ground around her. I don't know." The merchant looked as if he were about to burst into tears. How was he supposed to know where Alex had gone? He was just a cucumber salesman who was trying to boast to his friends. Elizabeth withdrew her gaze as white snow flower blossomed beneath her feet, and she abruptly disappeared on the spot. Does she have a vendetta against Alex? Mag thought to himself in a puzzled manner as he entered the city.